What terrible fact did you not realize about your spouse until after you married them? My cousin found out her fiancé was cheating on her the night before the wedding. His response was, "This is how the world works, grow up." The only person she told was my sister, and she was too scared to cancel anything the day of. My sister didn't tell me until we'd left the area, probably a wise choice. I have a temper and the buff fiancé would probably have kicked my butt, so nobody could do anything. The marriage, thank God, only lasted about 2 months or so. The best part about it was my near-comatose grandmother hearing about it, getting out of her chair and saying, "I'm gonna kill that son of a witch." Got married to the wrong person when I was way too naive and inexperienced. Found out after we'd got divorced that he'd been doing the deed with his stepmom since he was 15. My ex-wife was bipolar with tendencies towards not wanting to be alive anymore. When we fought, it got progressively worse until she started threatening to delete herself over just about anything. I divorced her 4 years ago. She finally went through with her threats a few years after that. I feel a tremendous amount of guilt, even though I might not have been able to change what seemed like the inevitable. As unenthusiastic as he was about doing the deed, he hated himself enough to screw anyone else who'd tell him he was a great guy. He was bad with money. Imagine getting your paycheck, spending $60 on green herb, then buying a Nintendo Wii, maybe an Xbox, some games, not used, new games, maybe even a game that comes with night vision goggles. Then spending more money on yourself because, "I work hard, I deserve to enjoy my paycheck." Imagine being 10 months behind on rent with your cable and cell phone turned off, being over 1K in debt to the gas and electric companies respectively. Do that for over a decade, never getting better. My rent has been on time for over a year now, my car payment is on time, my bills are paid and I can sleep at night. I have hardly any money left over, but I don't care, it's better this way. She has horrible hygiene habits, particularly oral hygiene. It's continued to deteriorate over the years. FML. As a recently married person, these comments are really depressing and I need to leave now. I was going to post something about how my wife leaves dirty dishes around and doesn't clean up after herself, but now I think I'm just going to go give her a hug. Perspective is one hell of a thing, isn't it? Yeah, maybe I need to come back and look at this when I think that my partner has sent me one too many cat stickers at any given moment. He was a lying, lazy, selfish slob who wanted a housekeeper and breadwinner combo. We didn't have the opportunity to live together before we got married. I didn't get to meet his family. He pretended to like everything I liked, and he wooed me with beautiful songs. He dropped all pretense after we married. He wanted to quit work so he could, quote, work on his music. Dude, you're good, but not that good, or that motivated. He wanted 2 bedrooms. Intimacy? I'll just go to your room and do my business. Business? Frick you, I'm out of here. In short, I fell for a honey-voiced pretender. You know, while we were dating, she seemed to be an industrious, independent woman. Now, all she wants to do is quit her job so she can sit at home, clean and cook for maybe an hour a day, and read raunchy vampire novels. Seriously. While I feel your pain, I'm honestly more angry about raunchy vampire novels being a genre these days. I keep asking my girlfriend if I can do this. She refuses me too. Those novels don't read themselves, you know. My wife would probably say that it was my substance addiction. I hid it from her, and then about a year into our marriage, she found out. It was pretty messed up of me to hide something like that from her. She stayed with me when she could have left. We're as happy as we've ever been now, and I'm not living a lie anymore. Not me, but my brother. He and his ex-wife were living with her parents, trying to save money to buy a house. After 6 years or so, they should have had about 80 grand in the bank account that she had controlled. He looked one day and there was 7 grand in there. She was a closet gambler and peed away about 73 grand. He didn't even know their wedding was paid on credit cards. Of course, he knows now that he was not very smart to blindly trust her with their savings like that, and yes, they are divorced now. That she was way too immature to deal with real-life issues because she'd never had to deal with things on her own. She went from relying on her parents to working a dead-end job, eventually quitting that one too, and then to relying on me. The first 6 years were great, then crap hit the fan. It all went downhill from there. Well, my wife liked sausages. Lots of sausages. Sausages that didn't belong to me. Damn, this blew up. Just like those members in her face. Long story short, I was a bit of a doormat. She cheated on me about 8 times. Yes, 8. I just felt like I needed her. After I got over her leaving, I felt frickin' fabulous. I met my fiancé and I've never felt this happy before. So the story had a happy ending, just like every guy my ex runs into gets. That despite him seeming like a modern man when I met him, washing his share of the dishes and cooking, and apparently liking me for being a non-traditional, non-housewifely woman, that was just his courtship personality. As soon as we got married and bought an apartment, we'd lived together for a year before marriage, he suddenly revealed that he expected me to do far more of the housework than him, although we both worked the same hours, and he'd bully me into accepting all of his decisions about everything, and get angry if I ever disagreed with him. When I finally left him, he said, "How can you not be happy with me? I never hit you," which to me kind of said it all. My husband started out with the fantasy of wife swapping. We talked about it often. I wasn't really into it, but he persisted. He told me I was boring and we needed to spice things up. He went on websites and chatted up other couples. Fast forward a couple of years, he put undressed pictures of me on AFF, used my real name, chatted up guys all the time telling me that I was good in bed, even though I was, quote, too curvy. This went on and I had zero self-confidence left. I'm finally leaving him, but the only reason I'm still alive is that I have a son, and I don't want him to grow up thinking about women the way his father does. My wife and I got married after knowing each other for 5 months. I found out pretty quick that she was insanely jealous. I literally couldn't turn my head without her coming unglued. It didn't help that I was something of a pig. The good news is we worked it out and are still happily married almost 39 years now. She is still the most beautiful woman I've ever met and is my best friend as well as my wife. 3 kids and 7 grandkids as well. People can change if you give them the chance. It kind of feels as though his wife came into the room at the end of his first paragraph. When my brother married, he discovered that my sister-in-law likes to clean. A lot. She found out that my brother is extremely messy and is grouchy all the time, not just when he's hungry. But they're actually happy. Now she's a little bit less obsessed with cleaning everything, and he is much cleaner. That he has severe anger issues and goes all Jekyll and Hyde on me regularly. I've told him that he needs to seek help or we'll need to go to counseling together, and he's just refused both. I'm a mental health nurse, but he needs hardcore therapy beyond our 4 walls. This morning, he woke up because the cat was scratching the carpet. He proceeded to yell at me for 30 minutes, stomp around the house searching for the cat so he can skin her and hang her from a tree. I asked him several times to stop yelling. He said that I should be as upset as he is. And I wasn't. He put his ring on the dresser and is now sleeping downstairs. He wanted my rings back. They're sitting on the dresser next to his. The next move is his. I've told him his anger would be the end of us, and it seems like he's made his choice. Update, I wrote him a letter asking him to spend the day thinking about life without me. He called me and told me to give him his effing ring back. The last lines of my letter were, "I love you, I want to give you your ring back." Now he tells me that if I don't declaw the cat, then we're over. The cat is 9 years old. I think declawing is inhumane, and he knows that. I sarcastically responded, "You might as well just put her down." He said that was a good idea. I told him it's a terrible idea, and his values are messed up. Now I'm at work, and this will be a long day. In case any people were wondering how this relationship turned out, the username is married too soon. I tried to dig up some confirmation on whether this meant they'd finally finished things with their partner, but there was no solid confirmation outside the name. Well, I didn't marry too soon, but definitely too young and immature. He was as well. Ex and I married at 25. Life got tricky at 30 with our first kid. He had been the driving force behind having kids, but didn't like how it changed his lifestyle. Second kid at 32. That kid was sadly born very sick and nearly didn't make it. My partner couldn't cope, and started having an affair with a woman at work. Within 18 months, he'd run off with her. He left me holding the bag with a disabled kid. He married that woman from work, and he's finally grown up now at the age of 46. They have an adopted kid, but also a full-time nanny and tons of household help and money. They don't have the daily life stresses we'd had. He's trying to be involved with our kids, but he's mostly just Uncle Daddy and buys them stuff. I'd have to say that I found out too late that I have anger issues I developed from the way my parents raised me, but thanks to my significant other, they're nearly gone. He was violent and controlling and just overall fricking insane. Like throwing a hissy fit in the grocery store because I wouldn't buy him stuff to make deluxe iced tea. Look, I wouldn't mind buying stuff to make iced tea, but he got it in his mind that he was going to make these incredible iced tea concoctions with gourmet tea bags, and he wanted $30 worth of the bags. I suggested he just get the normal stuff and he flipped out. I was the only one working, so he didn't have the money for it anyway. But he flipped out so hard and I bought it for him, and he tried making these tea creations and ended up hating them and throwing them all out. It's just one of those examples that stuck out to me. We had a similar situation when he apparently needed a chimney and he broke the damn thing, making a fire and getting drunk with his friends within the week. Now I look back and I should have seen the warning signs, but you never think your husband is going to slam you on the kitchen floor for disagreement over a chicken recipe. He also slept with one of my friends, although I never confronted either of them about it, because I didn't even give a crap and was just tired of it all by that point. Then he left me and it was freaking awesome. It was actually the nicest thing he's ever done for me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My ex and I got married when I was 19 and she was 18. She used procreation for no other purpose than as an acquisition tool. She never enjoyed it, in her words. When I could no longer give her anything new, she used it with other guys for the same purpose. She had a crap job, yet somehow managed to buy new clothes and purses, even a car. I was extraordinarily naive, I kinda still am, so I just figured they paid her well. Turns out I didn't know what they were paying her for. I ended up becoming a sort of zombie. Getting up, going to work, bringing back paychecks and giving them to her. We were married for 7 years and I only actually took one vacation, which was a week, that entire time. The main reason I never noticed her cheating on me was that I wasn't there. I was always at work. 1997 was a lost year for me. I don't remember anything that happened that year at all. I lost my 20s. While my younger work friends were going out to clubs, to concerts, to festivals, I was working. I was constantly trying to make our lives better because I thought cash would do it. I was never actually single until after my divorce, when I was broke and single, which meant I was still unable to enjoy those things, and I was 28 when it was finalized. In short, I was very naive, and naive people shouldn't get married. It's bad for them. You know what? I don't think I want to get married. Thanks, everyone. My wife had never eaten an orange. Man, I want to punch my mother-in-law sometimes for that crap. From my married best friend, that there were other women willing to do the deed with him. To clarify, he's a good guy and he's never cheated. He just wonders if he settled too early by marrying his first and not ever being with another woman. We'll go out to a bar and a girl will start talking to him, they'll hit it off, and then I can absolutely see him deflate when he has to wish them goodnight or the conversation requires him to be honest about his marital status. I think, like a lot of guys that settled down early and after only 1 or 2 girls, he just wonders what it would be like to have done it differently. I bet when you're married it's a lot easier to talk to and meet other women. Like they see the ring and automatically assume that you're just being nice or friendly and you're not some creep. Am I wrong in that thinking? Well, it's true. If an old guy is talking to me and getting too friendly, I get creeped out. But if he has a wedding ring, somehow I assume he has kids and his friendliness is purely paternal, so I let my guard down. It's naive and it's gone against me sometimes, but that's the way it works. I don't know that we got married too soon. We'd been living together for 4 years, and so far we've been married for nearly 14. He presented himself as someone with goals, as someone who expected to make some money. I never expected nor wanted him to be the sole earner, but he earns literally nothing and has never bought in much. No big deal, really. We do have fun, we do the deed a lot, and we generally get along. The problem is we now have children, and he still refuses to work outside the home. In fact, since the children have been born, he's more stubborn than ever. Saying his dad was always off on business trips, but he's going to be here with his kids. The problem with this is that I only make $11 and some change an hour. I have 2 little preschool-age kids. He quit his job after the first one was born, and due to me being laid off mid-pregnancy, I'd switched to his health insurance. So that was gone. So I basically work, sometimes even overtime if I can get it, and have to scrounge for SNAP and Medicaid, which I personally find quite humiliating. There's rarely ever dinner ready when I get home, the house is a mess, and he's always yelling at the kids. Yelling at me. Breaking stuff when he's mad. He kicked 2 holes in a door, put a hole in one wall, and ripped the trim off the corner of one wall so far. He's often yelling and literally crying with tears that no one appreciates him. We put the kids to bed around 8 p.m. and he yells at them to go back to sleep when they wake up at 8:30 in the morning. That's 12 frickin' hours. They don't need to sleep anymore. He stays up until 4 a.m. playing video games, then wants everyone to have sympathy and walk around on eggshells because he's tired. Go the frick to bed earlier or suck it up in the morning and stop acting like a gosh darn toddler. You have actual toddlers to take care of. In short, I married a childish man who behaves like a toddler. Presented himself as peaceful, mature, calm, and responsible. Isn't. Okay, yet another profile with very few updates on how things ended up after this pretty grim state of affairs. I will say that this man does not sound like he's doing well mentally, and that I would suspect that this is down to a lot more than him just being lazy. But you and the kids do deserve someone who contributes better than that and doesn't actively stop you from enjoying your lives. He's a completely different person around his very religious family. He talks down about me to his family to make himself look better. He hired his friend to ask my friends about any dirt they had on me. He lies, like a lot. He has anger issues. He's never physically hurt me, he's just been angry. Since his mother cleaned up after him, he doesn't do it himself, even now. He is super self-conscious. He cries easily, he hates me asking questions about his religion, and gets angry when I do. He talks way too much. He acts dumb when he's confronted about things. He spends money we don't have on things we don't need. He snores, although that's a new development. He puts cigarette butts in his pocket and never empties them when the laundry is done, leaving a wonderful smell that makes the clothes need to be re-washed again. He doesn't see the weirdness in having a conversation with anyone and everyone, everywhere, about things that do not need to be said to strangers. Like, I really don't think this random person standing behind us at Walmart gives a flying F about how you were raised and how many centimeters dilated I am when I was pregnant. Damn, why didn't I wait a bit longer? I will say that he's become a great dad. He wasn't at first. He'll admit that himself to people if the conversation comes up. He was jealous of all the attention my daughter was getting with the co-sleeping, feeding, and the colic baby. Also, I had some pretty bad anxiety that my child was going to die if I didn't have someone watching her while I slept, so I rarely slept, but he often slept more than 12 hours a day, which I thought was fine because he couldn't do much anyway, or at least I thought so at the time anyway. He isn't allowed to use any kind of physical discipline with her either. This took a lot of talking about to get him to understand that the Bible is bullcrap when it says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." I will not stand for biblical raising of our child. She will not be going to a church or be learning about religion unless she asks about it. I do not want her to be scared into religion. This is where his family and I have our issues. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm not upset with my wife anymore. I'm going to go give her a big hug and tell her how much I love her. He didn't tell me that I was proposed to a week after he secretly slept with his old girlfriend to determine which one of us he preferred, and he decided that I'd likely put up with his crap more than she would. It wasn't love, as I was assured, it was merely convenience for him. I found out the day we divorced 16 frustrated, uncomprehending years and 3 bewildered but patient children later. Oh, is that why you treated me like a second-class citizen after the first couple of years, and why you never paid attention to the kids despite them being the 3 most considerate, smart, good-looking, talented kids anyone could hope for? Is that why you spent any extra money you made on your expensive hobbies? Like sports cars, 5 motorcycles and motorcycle racing, target pistols and bullet-making gear, fly fishing gear and stuff that you swore was like investing and that we could always sell later at a profit. And yes, as you've probably worked out, that was grossly optimistic. You spent it on those things instead of clothes or shoes or, God forbid, college savings for the kids. Why you screamed at them for walking between you and the TV while you were busy downing your 12 tall boys a night beers. Why you never wanted to work for a company that could provide insurance for us because you wanted to only work for yourself because you, quote, didn't want to take orders, so I had to make sure my jobs provided our insurance and clothes and shoes and groceries and activities. Why you spend more time, money, and attention on your friends than your supposed loved ones. Why you moved us 900 miles away from my family on a whim, and then moved us 1,000 miles to live with your parents for a while when your whim didn't work out. Why your parents provided you with a house, which you later trashed after the divorce, and then another because you needed a place to live and you didn't want to pay the rent the way the kids and I did, so you never paid your parents any rent or second mortgage payment, or offered a dime toward property taxes because they evidently owed you a goddamn living. I'm glad you married the woman you left us for now, since she's stuck with you, but you could have saved us all a lot of problems if you had just been honest in the first place, you F-wad. I'm sorry for the rant, everyone, but I feel better now. Thanks for giving me a place to do so. She never told me that she was ace. It's taken me years to piece it together, but doing the deed was always the thing we fought over. She constantly made the excuses for why she didn't want to. We've been married for 10 years and we're in our early 30s. I have fibromyalgia and I'm unable to work, and she has an anxiety disorder. We're high school sweethearts, and through a lot of bad times and intimate living conditions, our communication has gotten better. I actually approached the topic with her last week and she was hesitant at first. After understanding what heteroromantic asexualism meant, she has a much better understanding of herself. He liked to do the deed with other men. I married a man I'd been dating for 3 months because on our second date he broke down and confided in me that he was dying of terminal leukemia. He said he wanted to make the most of his remaining months and marry me. Being 23 and dumb, I believed him without asking for any proof and said yes. My family all rallied behind me, believing him to be a dying man, and threw us an incredible wedding even though they barely knew the guy. He refused treatment, playing the "I want to die with dignity" card, and finally, after 4 months of marriage and no decline in his health, I confronted him. It was a lie, an elaborate lie. My husband is a sociopath and a pathological liar. I wish I'd known that.
What's the creepiest thing you've experienced out of nowhere? I was walking down the street when I saw a rusty nail in the road. I picked it up and threw it into an empty house's yard. That's not helpful, I know, but after I threw the nail, a man came out of what I thought was an empty house and shouted at me. I freaked out, thinking it was about the nail, and I kept walking towards my house. The guy didn't sound mad, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. He started following me onto the street and gesturing for me to come over, but my gut told me to keep on walking. I got home and see from my house, the empty house is now surrounded by cops. At this point, I still think it's about the nail. After a while, it gets worse and men in full gear show up. I found out later that the house was indeed empty, the men inside were known criminals, and I very much almost ended up a hostage. I dodged the frick out of that bullet. While cutting lawns along this bike trail, me and a coworker found a mostly decayed, severed from the knee down leg. The cops were called, they questioned us, and we never found out any more about what happened. Pretty creepy. That is creepy. I really wish the police would offer some kind of closure for the people who report crimes like this. Years ago, in the early 90s, my boyfriend was driving me home and we saw a man lying on the ground in the strangest position, kneeling with his head on the ground and bent at a sharp angle so that he faced the street. It was 2 in the morning and the man was covered in sweat with his eyes open. We pulled over and I hopped out of the car to check on this guy. His eyes were wide open and he seemed like his face wasn't moving, but it really felt like he was pleading for help. He didn't respond at all when called out to. No blinking, just glassy eyes. I reached out to touch him and he was ice cold. I'm sure he wasn't breathing. This was before cell phones, so I hopped back in the car and we sped back to my house to call 911. 10 minutes later, the police called back to ask for the cross streets again. Apparently they arrived at the corner and there was nothing there. I verified that they had the right spot and they said they'd call back if they needed any more information. That was the last I ever heard about it. I checked the newspaper for the next few weeks, but we never found out anything else about that man. Yeah, that one would haunt me for decades to come, and evidently our author has been thinking about it since then. I do wonder what would have happened if you had the tech necessary to call the cops and remain at this guy's side. Would you have witnessed a sudden recovery? A kidnapping by his attackers? Spooky. I worked from 2 p.m. through 11 p.m. at a gas station in one of the nicer cities around here, and I had a gentleman look me in the eyes and ask if I'm enjoying my last day on Earth. They walked away before I could answer. Power plant worker here. During shutdown, the large main steam valves tripped shut, and the subsequent water and steam hammer to the main lines was so intense, the pipes literally jumped a few feet. I thought that place was coming down around me. The sound and shaking was so violent. Like, check my pants scary. We're talking about steam temperature and pressure that can instantly flash the entire building if there's a branch, cooking everyone inside. Even a pinhole leak has the power to cut a person in half. Seriously scary crap when things don't go right. The summer after I graduated from high school, I left work early and went up to my parents' cabin in northern Michigan. I spent that night at the beach watching the sunset. Once the sun went down and it became nearly pitch black, because there's no light pollution, I got to my car and started driving down the highway, M22. After about 10 seconds of being at speed, there was an older Tahoe from the late 90s that started riding my butt and flashing its high beams. So I got up to about 60 in a 45 lane, and they were still on my tail. I pulled off to the side of the road that my parents' cabin is off of, and they took the same turn. I thought this seemed weird because there's only about 30 to 40 homes on that road, so I went all the way to the end, which is usually a dead end, but leads to a maintenance area for the golf course nearby. The truck was still following me. At this point, I was freaking out because if I pull into the house, they'd know where we lived, and they were still following close behind us. I took a ton of random turns, and the truck kept following every single turn for about 15 minutes. I finally had a chance to make a turn with traffic going through the intersection that gave me a few seconds of head start. I pulled down a side street, went up 100 yards, turned off all of my lights and waited. The truck slowly drove by the perpendicular street and kept going. I booked it home, pulled my car around the side from the main road, and pulled every curtain. For an 18-year-old, I was scared as heck that night. I worked for Radio Shack back in the late 90s, and I was scheduled to open on a Saturday morning. I go into the door, lock up behind me, and go to the back to get things ready, only to see my boss sitting at the chair in the back with his tie around his neck and tied up to an inventory rack with his pants around his ankles. That's the day I started drinking heavily. I often visit Walmart in the wee hours of the morning. One time I went in at about 2 a.m. and noticed an elderly gentleman asleep on one of the mobility scooters at the entrance. When I left about 20 minutes later, he was still there. I thought it was a little odd no one from the store had woken him up, but whatever. I found out the next day he had died and spent the better part of a day on display as a corpse at the entrance to Walmart. My 3-year-old, who's normally very happy-go-lucky, was extremely concerned the other day. He kept looking around the room talking about the rhino. Who knows what a 3-year-old might translate as a rhino? This went on for about 20 minutes. He was very concerned and looking around the entire time. So we got to a point where he says the rhino is moving. My wife asks where the rhino is. He's coming to Daddy. Yeah, so I'm Daddy and my butt puckered just a little bit at that moment. Fast forward about 4 days to last night, and the same kid starts talking about the ghost. My daughter asks my son, where is the ghost? And he says, he's biting Daddy. What the actual frick? I was ambling down an old country highway in northwest Georgia on my motorcycle, a 750 Vulcan, when I spotted an ambulance coming the opposite way. I pulled over, and a pickup truck pulled over behind me. In my rearview mirror, I see the passenger get out with a baseball bat and start hustling my way. I didn't even look, I just dropped it into gear and hauled butt. What followed was the most harrowing experience I've had in my life as this pickup truck proceeds to chase me all over the place for about 20 minutes. I'm unfamiliar with the area and my bike wasn't meant for going fast around turns, so I've got no room for error and it's all I can do to stay in front of these guys. I'm blowing through 4-way intersections in a bid to get some distance and come up with a plan, but they're all hellbent on catching me. I finally managed to get pointed towards the highway and into the cover of other cars, but then traffic stops on a bridge. The truck is 3 cars behind me, and I'm thinking if I can just get out to the highway, I'm probably home free because my Vulcan can go fairly fast in a straight line. In my mirrors, I see that the passenger is snaking through the cars on the bridge, so I lane split, which is illegal in Georgia, and make the on-ramp. I hammer down, and I'm gone, baby, gone. Never went back to that town. As far as I know, this was an unprovoked attack of the hillbilly variety, because prior to the ambulance, I hadn't even seen another vehicle. I don't ride particularly fast, and I don't believe in loud pipes. I got lucky as heck seeing him come up behind me like that. I wonder if he wanted your bike or what the goal was there. I mean, was he just going to go into a protracted beatdown with the possibility of other cars coming by? Honestly, you were probably praying to be pulled over by a cop during that entire chase. Our old house was on a corner, and in lieu of a backyard, it had a side yard with a small deck that was wrapped around the back. The dining room had patio doors that led out to the back, and we'd have barbecues and such back there. When I was about 14, we only had one desktop computer and one laptop for the family. My brother and I would fight over the desktop, that's where Diablo 2 was installed, so I'd use the laptop to write music. On one particular night, my brother had a friend over, and they were downstairs doing whatever, and I was at the dining room table on the laptop. As I was wrapping up in my writing, I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings. I heard a knock on the patio door, which startled me. I looked up, expecting my brother or his friend. The basement had a door that led to the back deck, so I thought maybe they were coming in. Standing at the door and waving was a person of indeterminate gender or age wearing a Halloween pig mask. Thinking it was my brother or his friend, I mouthed, "Good one," and gave the person the finger, and they walked away. As soon as they left, I went downstairs to give them crap, and to my surprise and dismay, they were both sitting on the couch playing PlayStation. They swore up and down it wasn't either one of them, and I knew there was no way one of them would have had time to get downstairs and unmask before getting on the couch. To this day, I have no idea who it was that knocked and waved. In short, a creepy mother effer in a mask knocked on my patio door and waved. It wasn't anyone I knew. I cocktail waited on a day shift at a small casino in Idaho for about 6 months during a bad time in my life. So basically everything sucked there, but especially this one guy, not very old either I'd guess, in his mid to late 50s, who had a stroke at a nickel slot machine. He crapped himself but then dragged himself back to keep playing while EMS was on the way. I was out to lunch in midtown Atlanta with some co-workers. We sat out on the patio. There are some high-rise condos right across the street. Some guy jumped from his 40th floor balcony and splattered all over the roof of someone's Jetta. Everything went everywhere. The noise was pretty memorable as well. We noped out of there before ordering. It was a very silent ride back to work. One of my co-workers said he won't sit out on patios anymore while eating.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I was working in an office pretty late. I'm 100% sure I was the only one there. The AC system shuts down at like 7 p.m, and until it does, you won't notice how much noise it's actually making. The office then got extremely quiet, which is unsettling to begin with, and I had my office door closed. About 30 minutes later, I hear the muted voice of a little girl with a heavy British accent saying, "Mummy, I think he's in this one." Note that I live in the American South, so there's no good reason for a British child to be there. I almost crapped my pants as the door cracked open ever so slightly until a real live little girl popped her head in and says, "Oh, no, sorry, wrong one." It turns out her American stepfather was still in the building. 18 years old and first time ever operating a dozer with an open air cab and roll cage. I was clearing trees out of a waterway on a farm. All of a sudden, I'm knocked out. I come to and blood is running down my face into my lap. Dozer is pushing up against a tree, just spinning its tracks. My head and neck hurt. I thought I'd been shot or something. No idea. There's nobody around me. I wasn't told how to shut off the dozer as it was an older 6C. You don't just turn the key off. I called my dad and he runs over and pulls the idle bar all the way down and it shuts off. We're both clueless as to what happens when he sees a branch behind my head that must have driven through the window and pushed it pretty far, and it snapped back into the cab and hit me in the forehead. Never saw it or anything. I once found the corpse of a coworker. The guy just didn't come into work one day. He didn't call, he was very reliable, lived alone, and didn't have many friends outside of work. So I went over to his place and convinced his landlady to let me in. I found a body in his armchair in front of the TV. Heart attack. He had been dead for about 12 hours at that point. 25 years later, and I still remember the grimace of pain permanently etched on his dead face like it was yesterday. I used to work at a tanning salon, and one day while I was alone during my early morning shift, I heard what sounded like a full-grown man running down the hallway. I looked and there was nothing. Just me. No machines were on yet, no one else was in the building. I sat in the office until my coworker arrived. You know what, for all the awful and disfiguring things that can happen in a tanning salon, not least that awful scene in one of the Final Destination movies, I'm happy enough that this was all that happened to you. I once worked as a live-in staff member in a college dorm. During the summer, we housed the few summer school students who remained on campus, nearly 30 of them. It may be significant to point out these students tended towards the highly academically motivated, oftentimes high-stress students, even if they were quiet. One warm day in late June, my office received a call from a concerned sibling that she and her family were unable to reach her brother who lived by himself in a room on the summer school floor. This wasn't unusual, as our office frequently dealt with students avoiding their kith and kin due to frayed nerves or general social awkwardness. Our normal protocol to check in on a student is to try and reach them by our emergency contact information. Failing that, go check their room to verify they're living in the building and perhaps available then and there, and then have them call their family to verify that we followed up on the original request. Also, we're to only enter a room with another staff member present to ensure personal safety of staff and students. I failed to reach the student on his room and mobile phone and was working short-staffed, so since I was on my own, I decided to pop up to his room and check on him. I arrived at his floor at about 2 in the afternoon, and the floor seemed deserted as I'd expected. I found his room number and immediately noticed the sound of a movie playing on a TV or computer from behind the door. I knocked 3 times and announced that I was a staff member checking on his health and safety. No answer. I didn't think this was that remarkable. College students are notorious for leaving electronics running while not in the room. I checked the floor showers and bathrooms and found them deserted. I returned to his door and knocked 3 more times, waiting 20 seconds between each knock. No answer. This is when my instincts started to buzz. I worked in residence halls a number of years as a professional, and something about all the pieces of this puzzle just weren't adding up. Family concerned about his health and safety, electronics running, someone must have started them recently within the time frame of a movie runtime, summer school students and their idiosyncratic behavior. Something just wasn't right. I was by myself, so I probably let myself get more worked up than if I was with someone else. A deserted dorm floor, even at 2 in the afternoon, oftentimes evokes Kubrickian memories of the Overlook Hotel. I decided that for some sense of closure or sanity, I needed the immediate resolution of keying into the student's room, even though I was by myself and not technically supposed to do so. I knocked on the door 1 more time for good measure, again announced myself as the hall director, then keyed into the room and my spider sense went off even stronger. The room appeared relatively vacant. The student appeared to be living out of a suitcase, which is unusual for someone staying no less than 8 weeks for a summer school session. The bedding was tousled like someone had been sleeping in it, and all the lights in the room were on. As I'd suspected, there was an open laptop on his desk running on battery power, playing The Matrix, but no student. I began to start rationalizing to keep from feeling unsettled. Surely this student and I had crossed paths on my way to his room before. I'd never met him, so I wouldn't recognize him otherwise. And maybe he was just down in the lobby picking up delivery food or a late lunch. Sure, that's it. Then I turned to leave, planning on trying to reach the student later in the afternoon or that night. As I turned to leave, I noticed another odd piece of evidence: the accordion closet doors. These are generally removed in most rooms due to disuse, particularly single rooms like this, and they were still in his room, and they were closed. Odd. I couldn't remember the last time I saw someone actually use these cranky, dysfunctional doors. Then my intuition spiked higher than ever. Crap. I realized I was alone in a room with a potentially self-deleted student who may in fact have completed just that process. And I'm about to be that guy who discovers the body and then has a crap ton of paperwork and undesirable tasks, not the least of which would be calling the family back to break the news. I felt like I was talking to myself when my voice cracked as I spoke to the closed doors and announced my name and title, and that I'd be opening those accordion doors in 3 seconds. I fumbled with the latch on the doors and finally managed to get them disengaged, and as I slid the doors apart, I was unprepared. I didn't know what I really expected. Something hanging there, a bullet wound. I'll tell you what I didn't expect. A 7-foot, dark-skinned Indian man staring at me embarrassingly as though I'd found his secret hangout. We stared at each other for a good 15 seconds without blinking, breathing, or speaking. I finally realized what was going on, and my natural emotion was disbelief. All I could think of to say was, are you in here hiding from me? He looked at me and said, yeah. My heart was still racing. I turned to leave, and before I shut his door, I turned back to him and said, call your sister, she's worried about you, and frankly, I am too. In short, I met an Indian in the cupboard. Literally. Scared the crap out of me. You know what? I think I would have screamed no matter whether the person on the other side was alive or not. Honestly, the lead-up and suspense dictated I'd be screaming at the highest pitch I'm capable of. Glad the guy was okay. When I was 17 and worked in retail as a cashier, I had a very old couple come through my line buying a wok. The husband, who was at least 85, started making conversations with me about the wok and asked if I liked Chinese food. Yeah, I like Chinese. Do you want to go out with me to get some Chinese? He winks at me. No, sir. Oh, well. He looked a bit disappointed and turned to look at his wife, who was on the phone with someone. Would you at least like to come home with me and live in my basement? No. The rest of the transaction took place in terrified silence. His wife never said a word. I wonder to this day if he was trying to joke because he sounded so sincere, or if he was suffering from dementia or something else that made him not realize how creepy that sounds to someone young enough to be your great-grandchild. I'm a teacher of adult students, and one student of mine is kind of intense and creepy. Actually, she's based at another school, but specifically started attending classes at my school after meeting me. When I first started, she started giving me welcome presents as I was new to the country. Just simple things like food, postcards, and books, which was a nice idea but seemed a little excessive. She added me on social media and then got upset when I didn't reply to her constant messages. I told her that I don't really use social media. Anyway, I didn't see her for a few months and figured that she had just gone back to her own school or stopped studying or whatever, and was relieved that she had clearly got bored of me. But then last week she comes in and gives me an envelope full of photos of me during lessons that she had taken, without me knowing. I was a little weirded out, to say the least. I wouldn't worry about me too much though. The girl's creepy, but she's just young, in her 20s, and interested in the foreign teacher. No restraining order necessary. This is China, and I get a lot of weird attention for being foreign here. This just happens to be one of the more standout cases. That being said, if you don't hear from me in 24 hours, well, you know what happened. Hearing music that isn't actually playing from the store speakers. It's quiet, but it's there. Given the crap I was dealing with at the time, I'm fine writing it off as hallucinations or delusion. I work in a supermarket in the early shift, and part of my job is changing the shelf labels for the price changes each day. Just this last Wednesday gone, I was putting new labels on a shelf of hand soap when, about 2 feet along the shelf from me, a bottle shot off and landed in the middle of the aisle. I looked along the aisle at my colleague and she just shrugs her shoulder and says, happens all the time. I never directly witnessed anything else, but being one of the first on the shop floor each day, I'm now questioning all of the items that I see sitting in the aisles first thing, and guessing that I can't blame untidy customers for all of them. What's life's biggest trap that people fall into? The sunk cost fallacy. Just because you've spent a certain amount of time or energy or money on something, it doesn't mean you need to stick with it forever. If you're really unhappy in a relationship, don't stay in it just because you've spent the last 10 years with that person. If you're miserable at work and there's no happiness in sight, don't stay just because you'd put too much time and energy into it. I know a couple of people in debt because they have this mentality when it comes to gambling. If they lose $1,000, they'll gamble another $1,000 to try and win it back with, since they feel they've invested so much already. Of course, they lose again and feel compelled to gamble another $2,000 to break even. At some point, you've just got to count your losses and move on. Getting married to the wrong person at the wrong age out of sheer fear of staying alone. I don't know that it's the biggest trap, but definitely procrastination is a massive one. A lot of people think it's funny or joke about being procrastinators, usually along with stories of a clutch, last-minute scramble that somehow worked. I'm one of those people. Even if those stories are fun, there's a less fun side to procrastination. It's when there are no deadlines, no due dates, but you tell yourself that you'll do it tomorrow every day. That you'll learn a language, talk to your parents, get a degree, whatever. Then one day, for whatever reason, it's too late and you just feel regret. Don't procrastinate. It'll catch up with you eventually. Cultural or social pressure to get married before you're ready to be married. I have 2 groups of friends who married in their early 20s. One of those groups dated for 3 or 4 years after high school and realized that they'd already built the foundations of their lives together, so they got married after college. They have a home, a child, and a goofy cat. The other group dated for a year or 2 after high school and got pregnant by accident. Family pressure, religious pressure, and societal pressure made them cave and get married when they were about 22 or 23 years old. They divorced before the child was born, they absolutely hate each other, and blame each other for ruining the other's life, and their child is stuck in the middle of it. The narrator lost touch with almost all of his high school friends over the years, but yeah, a couple did get hitched. There's a lot of Schrodinger's marriages to check back into sometime to see which of those groups they fit into. Sales. Just because something is on sale, it doesn't mean you're saving money, especially if you wouldn't have bought it otherwise. Think of it not as saving 50%, but spending 50%, for example. I don't know if this counts as a trap, but having the mindset ingrained into you, starting from childhood, that you have to be friends with everyone you meet. I try to be friends with everyone, but after a while of getting to know them, I decide they're not really the kind of people I want as a friend. Thinking that you have to achieve everything. People think that they have to be motivated to do something. They get a burst of motivation to start something, and then they never finish it. Thousands of hours or dollars flushed into something waiting on their inspiration that'll never get finished. If I recall correctly, Stephen King forces himself to write 4 to 6 hours a day. That always inspired me to tread through the hard parts. Anyone can start something. Lifestyle inflation. A friend of mine just lost his job due to corporate resizing. He worked at the same company for 8 years and built up a very hefty variable monthly income from sales commission while his base pay barely increased. His lifestyle got inflated over the 8 years, living in a nice condo, driving a Volvo SUV, they're expensive here in Asia, 2 kids, and told his wife to leave her job to focus on the kids. Now he's out of a job with more loans than he can manage and with career capital that's been stagnant for the past 8 years. Oh, the biggest trap? It's Reddit, hands down. Failing to move beyond your past. I've seen this everywhere I go, and certainly in my extended family over the years. Basically, depending on who you are, but for many of us, life punches you in the mouth. Past issues and injustice like the shortcomings of one's parents, growing up poor, failed marriages, or even feeling like you failed your own children are examples of what can keep people completely stuck in their tracks if they can't let go of the pain. Many uncles and aunts who are substance addicts, poor, alone, among other things, all share the one thing: the inability to reconcile problems from their past, stemming mostly from fractured relationships with their parents and severe poverty sometimes. My cousins who have the same issues, 2 out of 3 were born with learning disabilities and never moved beyond the feeling that they were dumb and didn't belong in a classroom. Neither of them graduated high school. Many of us have been hurt, born into bad situations, whatever. One characteristic that makes some people more successful than others in this situation is the ability to let go of their pain. If you won't do it, you can't find the inspiration and drive you'll need to achieve personal success. Caring what some jerk thinks about you. I feel like people rush into marriages and kids because society tells you that that's the natural course your life must take, and then people end up with a mortgage and kids and feel miserable. I pretty much decided that I'm 27, I don't want kids, and if I get married at some point, great. But it really removed a lot of stress from my life. I can focus on things I actually want to do now. When I was pregnant, I'd have women constantly say how they haven't gotten there yet, and they'd act like their life was some kind of failure. I'd tell them that not everyone is on the same path or timeline. The woman I recall talking to was traveling the world. I thought that was a great way to spend a life. Not everyone has to settle down by getting married or finding a permanent residence and raising kids. Staying in their comfort zone rather than extending themselves to try new things and grow as a person. They stop trying as soon as something gets hard. The idea that you need all this crap to be happy. Consumerism can be killer. In my opinion, there's no real plan for anyone. I'm not talking about religion, but the pressure people put on themselves is incredible. I've got to graduate college by this year. I've got to have a house at this age. Life is full of so many different people, stories, places, and things. Take the pressure off of yourself and enjoy it. College. It's not really for everyone, and if it's not, then why go into so much debt? The whole situation largely happened because people saw that if you've got a degree, you were pretty much guaranteed a good job. But they failed to understand why that was true at the time and instead came to the naive conclusion that if everyone got a degree, then everyone would have a better job. But college degrees back then netted better jobs in part because they were relatively rare and in part because the better jobs that were available really did benefit from or need more education from those that filled them, which meant an ever-increasing number of people going to college without a clear career desire to fit a degree to, which destroyed both of those things. There are also problems with inflated requirements and a loss of respect for people in low education jobs that are still an honest day's work. To be honest, it's wild how many of us found this out after our multi-$1,000 5-year investments. Oh well, at least most of us partied it right up and had some good memories. Looking for short-term solutions instead of committing to long-term investments. Any sort of investment in yourself, whether it's career, health, education, salary appreciations, etc., takes years of hard work. So many people go from short-term solution to short-term solution for years, never making any progress. From one crash diet to another, from one get-rich scheme to the next. Then they get old, they've accomplished nothing, become bitter and blame everyone else. If you're willing to put in hard work and be consistent about it, you'll have well-paying jobs, you'll fix whatever issues you have, and be in good health. Taking life too seriously. You have to surrender to it after a while. The happiest people I've come across are so open and vocal about their vulnerabilities and problems. The most unhappy ones are constantly competitive. They think admitting weakness is a failure, They think contentment is a lack of ambition or a laid-back attitude. Just be brave and soldier on. Thinking that potential is in any way important. You don't get points for half-finished projects, and ideas are cheap. Things you have the potential to do are meaningless unless and until you actually do them, and until you actually do them, you don't get to brag. The guy sitting in Starbucks on his MacBook, writing the same 10 opening pages of his novel over and over again without ever making it to page 11 is kidding himself. Don't be that guy. Actually finish things, then either move on to the next project or try and edit the last one to make it better. Complacency when it comes to money. You work hard for your wages, but how hard do they work for you? If it all goes to minimum payments and gas, you're never going to get anywhere. It can really suck to make it happen, but getting out of debt and actually building a savings account is such a good feeling. People make fun of my old car and my small apartment in one breath, and in the next, they're freaking out about what'll happen if they lose their job tomorrow. Meanwhile, my husband and I can put away enough for the future and fun things, help support our extended family, donate to charity, and still have enough to go out to a movie and dinner every week. We still don't have a ton in savings, but I make enough at my $2 above minimum wage job to support us if my husband loses his, on top of the 6 months' wages we have in savings. It's all because we ignored common sense advice about money. Agreed. I drive an old and kinda crappy car, and I have a small one-bedroom, kinda far from things. My coworkers have nicer apartments and better cars, but then they insist I must be rich when I take long weekends in Reykjavik. Automated bill paying is really convenient, but it definitely robs a lot of people of understanding exactly how much they blow on things that they don't need.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I think the biggest trap is when the money you're earning is just enough to live semi-comfortably, but the time it takes to earn it is also stopping you from improving yourself. Around here, 2 incomes at $14 an hour, 40-hour weeks, is enough to live rather comfortably in a middle-class area, but never enough to do anything fun or really have a family. It's a trap because I can earn less or quit entirely. At least then I'll be able to get a skill set or education that pays better. However, at the time it would be quite painful overall, so people get trapped by refusing the pain and never making the gains. Spending money that you don't have to buy things that you don't need to impress people that you don't like. The script? Go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, retire, die. Aside from that final step, all the other ones are optional. Do what you want. You don't need to go to college to have a good career, you don't owe it to society to get married, you don't owe it to your family to have kids, and you don't owe it to yourself to retire. It's your life, live it how you want. Thinking that moon-sized battle stations are non-operational. The stuff that makes you feel the best, substances, booze, and food that's bad for you, will kill you prematurely. Consumerism, allowing themselves to be manipulated by advertising and marketing into thinking that they're just one product short of happiness. Facebook. It's nothing short but advertisements, videos with advertisements, news from untrustworthy sources, crappy conspiracy theories people come up with while on the crapper, but every once in a while you'll see someone's cute cat or dog. I've been Facebook and Instagram free for a month and I don't plan on ever going back. It feels like I have my life back again. Why does it seem like there are only people who obsessively use Facebook all the time for that stupid crap, or people who've sworn off it and won't touch it? I rarely bother with my newsfeed, but it's a nice way to chat to friends and organize events. There's a middle ground where it's a really useful tool. I've got no idea why so many people struggle to find it. Overextending yourself on a mortgage. Real estate is such a volatile market, and before you know it, you owe more than your house is worth. The American dream can quickly turn into the American nightmare. 1. Debt. The worst thing you can get into in your 20s. If you instead save and invest, you'll avoid major troubles in your life. And 2. Spending time fighting and arguing with nasty people. Just let it go. It's not worth it. The narrator has been much happier with his life since he just stopped dealing with people who clearly just want to have an argument. Devil's advocates and party debaters are just so fricking annoying. Thinking, I have plenty of time left. In the worst case, you die tomorrow, no matter how old you are. It can be a car crash at 16, bursting aneurysm at 30, or getting shot at 55. Or the second, equally scary alternative, you grow old and are then too old to do the stuff you told yourself you would do one day. Travel the world when you retire, catch a common illness like heart disease, and nope, there's 1,000 things you suddenly can't do. Oh, come on, this is a bit extreme. Actually, the worst case scenario is that you die right now. I know so many people who just get locked into work, go home, eat, sleep, repeat. Day in, day out. Their weekends or days off, they're busying themselves doing housework, shopping, and then it's back to work again. They become more and more miserable, but somehow they just can't see it. I try to tell people, you need to do something random at least once a week, something out of your routine. You'd be amazed at how little it inconveniences you. I myself find that routine creep happens from time to time. That you think, this has to be done though. I really have to sometimes will myself to just go, you know what, I'm just going to go to the movies. It takes a few hours out of your day at most, and it rejuvenates you, even if it's a crap movie. Homeowners associations. They're usually not worth the money you're forced to sink into them every year. I don't know about other parts of the country, but where I live, if you don't pay your HOA dues, even if you're current on your mortgage, the HOA can seize your house and kick you out. Living everywhere but the present. Focusing on your own looks and other people's looks as the most important characteristics of a person. Way too much effort is spent on makeup, hair, and dressing just the right way, and then taking and posting selfies. I mean, presentation is everything to people you don't know. If you look well-groomed and wear good clothing, you come across as someone who gives a crap about themselves compared to the guy in shorts and flip-flops. This makes many interactions in life easier. People who don't know you take your word more seriously. That's just my 2 cents, though. You don't have to spend boatloads of bucks to look good, but looking good is worth investing into. The most amazing one to me is when people get stuck in their hometown. Working a 9-to-5 that they hate to pay for stuff that they really don't need. Letting normal dictate how you live. Don't want a desk job? Great! Do something you love and you're good at. You don't want to get married? Alright, then don't. A piece of paper means nothing if you're not being honest and happy. Don't want to go to college? Then don't. Get out there and work. See point A. Experience life and put your time towards something you're proud of. The older we get, the faster time flies, so spend it wisely. Never stop doing things that light your eyes up. Starting college right after high school, especially when the young adults don't know what they want to do. I'm not talking about stellar individuals with a goal in mind. Many young adults need to get out and see what they want to do. I know far too many of them jumping from major to major and never finishing college. They end up with debt instead of a career. Assuming everything will work out for the best. This is a guy's advice for a guy. Maybe it works for women too, but it wouldn't surprise me if it didn't. Thinking you have to live the dream your parents, society, or anyone else has planned for you. It's not their life, it's yours, and what you do should only be about what you desire or want. Waiting for someone or your dreams to happen. You must make your dreams happen. No one else will do it because no one else cares as much as you do. Nobody will ever tap you on the shoulder and say, "It's your time, it's your turn now." Never. Make it happy if you really want it. Thinking you have to prove something to someone else. It might be an old girlfriend or boyfriend who dumped you, but you still hold a flame for. It might be that best friend who put you down when you least expected or needed it. If you only achieve X, then they'll think of you differently, is what you're thinking. The fact is, they don't actually care, nor do they remember that you didn't measure up as you imagine that they think they do. Thinking that people are judging you. Mostly, people don't judge you unless they've explicitly told you they're doing so. Mostly, people don't care about you and they're actually ignoring you, not actively shunning you. You are an object to them. Thinking that other people's opinions of you really mean you are what they say you are. Okay, if a friend says, "You really need to know this because you're hurting yourself," then take their opinion under advisement. But in other cases, the best thing is not to give them the satisfaction to confirm their opinions. Who says they have any legitimacy? This is especially if it hurts you deeply. Don't invest more emotional energy into a situation than it really deserves. That applies to new relationships. Take it slow. That applies to road rages while driving. Take a deep breath. And that applies to bullies. Laugh them off, roll your eyes, or ignore them. You might see a pattern to what I'm saying. Never mistake for malice what is actually pure indifference. And don't forget indifference can work for you as well. believing anything anybody says on the internet, especially when all of the comments are written by 20-something-year-olds who think they have life all figured out, giving bad advice. Substances. Crappy communities make it seem like the only option, but it's not. That you have to have a big wedding ceremony with a giant dress, tons of expensive food, flowers, photographer, catering. All of that is nice and all, but maybe I'd like to get married to the person I love without putting myself in $50,000 of debt. Yeah, a house deposit for a big party does seem a bit far-fetched, doesn't it? No matter how much you love the person, I still think eloping is the best option. Thinking that you can't rebuild your life from your mistakes. Almost 4 years ago, I got a DUI and evicted from my apartment shortly after. I had no direction and was a single parent of a damn great kid. I didn't think that I'd be able to fix this. I decided to get my act together bit by bit, budgeted my money and paid down my debts. Went to school through a university online while working 2 jobs. After my license was given back, I learned not to use the booze to numb my feelings and to never drive inebriated. Ever. I now have a wonderful job in my field where I'm licensed and a second one for extra money. Just leased a new car. Bills are paid, credit went up, damn great kid is still great. Family's respect is renewed, and I have an amazing significant other who watched me rebuild and supported me, and I know that he's the one. I promise you can build back from your rock bottom. Don't get stuck in that thought trap. Personifying things like society, the economy, identity groups, it's a useful mental shortcut for getting a quick and very basic grasp of complicated things, but it leads to really stupid conclusions when people forget that the map is not the territory. It causes people to imply intentionality where there is none. It assumes an ability to coordinate mass action in unrealistic ways. It also causes people to assume groups are much more monolithic than they actually are. Not exercising or eating right. Easy to fall into, and it happens. Just don't do it for too long, like years. I stopped running and eating right 9 months ago, ruined my body, and now I'm chubby and gross. The biggest trap is not working on your brain. People live their whole lives saying to themselves, nothing's going to change, this is who I am. Mostly they do it out of laziness because changing for the better takes work. What did you do to get your boss fired? Management was giving an injured worker a whole bunch of crap, not wanting to pay him, accusing him of gold bricking. The worker said, "Tell you what, do the right thing here or you'll be sorry." Management said, "Take your best shot." The worker called the EPA and the APCD and told them where to find the logs that showed discrepancies in toxic material storage and usage. The sheriff's deputies showed up and raided the offices. Field supervisors from 10 years ago that had retired got subpoenaed. It was epic. It cost the company massively in fines and remediation, all because they wanted to mess with one poor employee. Not my story, but my mother's. I watched on the sidelines as a teenager. My mother's job was basically a professional fundraiser. I don't really know what else to call it. People came to her to help raise money for non-profits or other foundations that needed it. This was a long time ago, before social workers were more of a mandatory thing at high schools. My high school was very poor and didn't have one, so my mother took it upon herself to set up a fundraiser to pay the salary of a social worker so my high school could have one. After raising all the money, she went to talk to the principal, who flat out refused to take any of it and said the position just wasn't necessary. My mother was pretty upset and just decided that she'd donate the money to supplies or something like that. I honestly have no idea what she did with it, but it did go to some sort of charity. After a few months, at a Christmas party, the superintendent of all the public schools in the area was at the same party, and he struck up a conversation with my mother. After some small talk, my mother said it was such a shame that the principal didn't take the money for the social worker position. The superintendent was dumbstruck and then told her that he'd ordered the principal to find funding for that position, and when superintendent asked him about it, he replied with, "No one's interested in that and we just couldn't get the money for it." Needless to say, the principal lost his position, and whenever we came back from the holiday break, the school was hiring for his position. Not fired, but transferred. Had a squad leader make us all stand out in the Missouri winter, soaking wet until someone volunteered for weekend duty. I told him I had a previous cold weather injury, frostbite, and he ignored it. The corporal saw my blue feet when I took off my boots and sent me to the aid station. The doctor lost his crap, and that squad leader was in another company the next day.
It's not as satisfying as getting someone fired, but it's the army, so that's not going to happen. And I'm guessing you were the hero of your squad for the foreseeable future. Just a shame he likely went on to injure another company with his neglect. I got my boss disbarred. He was an attorney who was a serial unspeakable act offender of female clients and criminal defendants. He got away with it for over 20 years and preyed upon at least 12 different victims. The Office of Attorney Regulation censured him multiple times for other offenses, like being late to pay his annual bar fees, but even though they knew about at least 5 of the victims, they wouldn't disbar him. I discovered that the Office of Attorney Regulation decides whether to pursue an action against an attorney based on a cost-benefit analysis. I gathered as much documentation of everything as I could over a 6-month period. Goodbye. Advanced through the company through hard work and dedication and slowly began to usurp the boss's duties and responsibilities. Eventually, the owner realized what a lazy schmuck the old boss was and laid him off. A week later, I got a new title and a 35% raise. I worked the register at a tour company. I also had a manager who frickin' hated me for some reason. She was probably the angriest person I've ever met. Constantly yelled at us for no reason, got on to me about answering questions a new hire had when I was asked, not her, and wrote down that I was 30 minutes late for a shift when I was 2 minutes late, among other things. We had a sneaking suspicion that she was taking money from the tills, as she was always the one who counted down the till when someone got fired for stealing cash. I made it a habit to count down every bill when I gave it back to a customer because we'd get pay-docked if we were even $1 off. So if a customer had $23 and change, I'd count 20, 1, 2, 3 in front of them, so I knew I'd given the right amount back. We also had cameras pointing at the registers. Well, one day my GM pulls me aside and says $20 was missing from my till and they're going to fire me. I straight up told my boss she could look at the cameras because I counted out all of my bills for customers. Lo and behold, the witchy witch was the one who counted down my till and got caught on tape pocketing the money. She was gone by my next shift. F you, Jennifer, I won. Mine is pedestrian but very satisfying. I was working in a garden centre. I'd been there a long time and was woefully overqualified for the job I'd been doing and was therefore very valuable in that position. Think ops manager skills at admin assistant position and pay. We lost our sales manager one year and corporate hired a new one. Let's call her Flora. She was a real piece of work. I don't know what her interview looked like, but in person she was instantly and constantly rude and strident and mean and curt and dismissive, and that attention-seeking brand of lazy where she threw her weight around without cause, talked crap about anyone not in the room, and collected 75% of the credit for 5% of the work. She had some knowledge, I guess, but it's way easier to teach a competent manager how to grow flowers than it is to teach a jerk horticulturalist how to be a human being. Anyway, for whatever reason, corporate loved her, so she stayed. What with one thing and another, I got another job. This process was slightly accelerated by Flora, but only a little bit. I'd been looking for some time, mostly waiting for the right opportunity. When I gave my 2 weeks' notice, I got an email the next day scheduling my exit interview with the head of HR. Now, my position didn't get exit interviews, only managers and sometimes department supervisors did. And everyone at my store knew why I was leaving, so there was literally no reason for the store manager to pull strings to get me one. And he never said anything about it. But I knew he set it up so I could tell the head of HR, a man I was very friendly with, that I was leaving because of Flora. And I did. I just laid into her. I said that Flora was the only reason I was leaving after almost 10 years with the company, during which time I wrote the company's health and safety program, trained almost every person who did my job at other stores, made spreadsheets that got used company-wide, as well as setting audit records that still stand to this day, and all for a few pennies over minimum wage. I said I was going because she was the worst and I couldn't take it anymore. I found out later that she was let go. I was thanked by most of my old workmates. My manager never said a word about it to me, then or since. He was a real OG. I used to work at a title company and witnessed our department manager forge mortgage documents on a regular basis. So when she went to upper management to throw the entire department under the bus for being behind on recording documents,
I marched straight to HR to resign and let them know what she was doing. She was fired and they called me and offered me my job back before the week was out. It was a better environment for a while, but then it got bad again. I moved on and I work in healthcare now and I'm much happier. For a while, I was a project manager who got moved around from project to project as a fixer. I was moved to a project where the customer just couldn't be satisfied, no matter how many people, how much attention, or how we bent over for them. Our program's director, who should have been our advocate, would not manage the customer, and instead just hammered his employees to do more. People on our team were being let go due to failure or quitting outright due to burnout, and he was complaining that he couldn't get good people. Because of my sort of special position as a general dog's body, I happened to have the ear of our VP, and this project came up in casual conversation. I mentioned that it seemed funny that if the director was doing his job, how so many employees that we knew by fact and reputation were good employees had failed. A week later, I heard the director had been let go, and nothing of value was lost. I got mine fired by doing so much myself that it started an investigation into what my boss was actually doing during their day. Officially, she was fired for sending undressed pictures through corporate email, but the only reason they were tracking her email was to understand what she was spending her time on. Turns out, it was an affair. I can just imagine her boss and the IT guy going through those emails together. Okay, let's see, what's in this attachment? How much time theft are we looking at here? Oh my god, close it! Was working maintenance at an ice rink. The rule for anyone who knows how an ice rink works is that if the Zamboni doors open, you get the F off the ice. Some idiot decided to ignore the fact that they were open and that I was standing in the doorway and decided to rip off one last slap shot. The puck bounced off the glass and hit me in the head. I was okay, but I reported it to my boss, because we have to fill out an incident report for things like that. The boss asked, "Are you okay?" and I said, "I feel okay," and then he responded with, "Well, we don't really have to report it then, do we?" I reminded him of the protocol, but it was clear he didn't want to do it. Since he wouldn't do it, I sent a descriptive email of the incident up to the administration, because I felt there should be some sort of documentation or paper trail in case, God forbid, I ended up having a brain hemorrhage or something a few days later. My boss was fired by my next shift. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was an intern at a tech company, and in a one-on-one mentorship meeting, my boss asked me what skill set I wanted to pursue in the future. I said that I wanted to do back-end work. This was a programming internship, and he replied with, "Girls aren't smart enough for that kind of work. Now, how about we put you on the QA path? You'll do better there." At the time, I was so stunned that I just repeated quietly that I wanted to do back-end work. The meeting awkwardly ended after that. I always thought I'd be courageous in the face of blatant sexism if it ever happened, but instead I was silent because I was a 23-year-old who really needed that internship to turn into a real job. Fast forward a couple of weeks and I was out to lunch with a few co-workers who brought along a lady who had worked at the company for years. She'd been out on contract for a while, so I hadn't met her yet. Everyone was talking about the boss and some of the stuff he'd done or said to them, mostly just rude things, so I took a chance and mentioned what had happened in that meeting. She said she'd take care of it. Within a few days, he was fired by the big boss. I went on my first contract doing back-end work about a month later, and I loved it. As I understand it, I wasn't the first person to have serious complaints about him, just the last person. I had a job that required my supervisor to be doing evaluations of my cases and charts. She just hadn't in months. She and my director ordered me and my co-workers to do our own chart audits, fill out the forms, and they'd sign off. I was so tired of not having adequate supervision, staff meetings weekly where she yelled at us, and invariably someone crying due to stress and lack of support, and not having been paid enough to do everything I was doing and their job. I refused, and I was told to do it or I'd be fired. Nope, I got fired. On my way out to my car, I called my former director who had moved to another agency. She set up an interview for the next day and I had a new job within 24 hours. She asked me what had happened at that interview. I spilled all the tea.
Her sister-in-law was on the board of the previous agency, so she called her and I told her everything too. Director was fired and supervisor was reprimanded and put on close monitoring. She had killed any chance of promotion and left shortly afterwards, I heard. I was just happy to have jumped ship from that toxic mess. I should have left months earlier. Our manager spent her whole shift in the office watching us on camera, and if we so much as stopped to talk to each other, she'd come out and yell at us to get back to work. She was completely immature. One time I left my water bottle at the front counter and my coworker had to stop her from purposefully throwing it away. She'd make up rules on the spot if she didn't like something someone did. I could go on. She was a terrible, unfriendly, hypocritical, mean manager. Honestly, we all just went to the owners and told them everything and how it made us feel. They got HR involved and got her fired and found out she might have been stealing or giving away products. It was such a relief. If you work for a small business, just be honest with the owners if management isn't family. It was my supervisor. It got to the point where I decided to quit. I had my resignation letter in my purse, but decided to let his boss know why I was quitting. Supervisor would talk about all the other people on our team constantly, but only behind their backs. I got so sick of telling him to cut it out. My husband and I happened to work at the same place, different departments, and my supervisor would make inappropriate comments about three-ways with him. Ugh, what hotel we picked for our afternoon delight and stuff like that. It was so uncomfortable. Apart from that, he spent most of his supervising time outside smoking. The problem was, supervisor was one of the guys, and I was the only girl. Turns out, his boss was disgusted. Told his boss, who lost his mind. They started an investigation which took 3 days. They interviewed staff, they corroborated what I said, they checked the security cameras, saw he was spending most of his day outside smoking, and he was fired. When he was told, he guessed that I was the person who complained. No crap, and tried to get me to apologize that I took it the wrong way. The best feeling was my coworkers surrounding me as he was walked out. That was a lovely ending to it all. I proved that he didn't know how to do his job and was just passing my work off as his. I had a boss who refused to make accommodations for a disabled coworker, refused to keep other staff in line and basically let the disabled worker fall behind and get picked on because she, the boss, felt like she wasn't required to do anything else. I work for a local government agency and reported it to our HR and upper management. After they did nothing, I contacted them again to let them know I'd be filing a suit with the ACLU for ADA violations. My boss was gone in 2 weeks and the rest of the staff had mandatory ADA training. I used math to prove to my boss's superior how severely my boss had underestimated turnover 3 years in a row, costing a ton of money and labor issues. One day earlier, the boss had screamed at my team until his face went purple, making a huge spectacle in front of the entire floor. The gist was that we were colluding against the company by a handful of us electing not to renew our contracts. Came back with graphs and maths, baby. He was demoted and transferred out a couple of weeks later. Pro tip, don't make a grumpy scapegoat out of someone who loves to make Excel graphs. So many people at a certain level here seem to get transferred rather than fired. What are we missing here? Why would you want to keep someone who's neither well-liked or competent? Maybe someone can explain in the comments? He was always slacking off. He'd go and do a 15-minute break and be gone 2 hours. He'd have to shoot off early for a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment, always with no prior warning, and whenever he was obviously bored. This was, mind you, within weeks of the new shop opening and all of us being hired. I was young and I went along with it for a while. My colleague was in her 40s and vaguely knew him anyway, so she wasn't standing for it. She reported him repeatedly to our area manager, who decided to come down to speak with him about it. The area manager rung in the morning, told him to stay in the shop today and send one of us out for anything that needed doing. He said he had something to do, but his boss said, "Nope, we need you in the shop." Somehow he didn't get the obvious message and went out anyway. The AM came down and he was gone. My manager wouldn't answer his phone all day. She was furious. At the end of the day, when we were closing up, he walked past, posted his keys through the door, and I never saw him again. Didn't even attempt to argue his case. I got a manager fired because he wrote very inappropriate things to me on Facebook. I'd proven myself as a competent management-level employee. She, on the other hand, showed favoritism, broke rules, and set schedules that nobody could work, and all around didn't give a crap as assistant manager. When the manager left, she assumed she was a shoo-in. After all, she was the assistant, so why wouldn't she be promoted? We both got called into a meeting with the district uppity-up, who told us both that I was going to be the new manager, and she lost her crap. I never saw her again, and quickly after, all her relatives that worked there quit mysteriously. She was hired as the new director. Didn't know much of anything about what she claimed she did. The straw that broke the camel's back was when she stated her boss would sign anything she put in front of him because he didn't know what it was. Whoops! I was the head chef of a small restaurant that I eventually owned before my life collapsed, but that's a different story. The owner, who was rarely there, suspected the general manager of stealing. On quiet nights, if she thought that she wasn't making enough on tips, the place was small enough that on slow nights it was just the two of us working, she'd go to the computer from the manager's screen and delete any tables that were paid in cash and just pocketed the money herself. I got suspicious when my food cost numbers that would just never add up to what was being sold. So I got a hold of the software company that ran our computer system, and it turns out they have a back door that even the management can't see that logs every single keystroke. Turns out she'd ripped off close to 20 grand over a 6-month period. She was asked to leave after that, but for some reason the owner didn't bother to press charges. My mother worked for a starting company, and her boss really needed her help, because the boss wanted my father to invest. He owns a couple of companies. My mother would get a job as a second-rank CEO right under the woman she got fired. In fact, the boss kept treating her like crap, so she told my father. My father told the other investors, and all 3 of them cancelled the deal. They set up the same kind of company with my mum as the only CEO. All people who worked for that former boss left and began working at the new company. My manager at a new job, let's call him Leo, offered to give me a ride home after a Friday night shift went overly long. Instead of turning into my street, he went to a bar about a mile in the opposite direction so we could, quote, get to know each other. I had 1 drink and asked to go home. Instead, he bought me a second one. I asked to go home again, and he tried to make a move on me. The details aren't important, let's just say he was pretty aggressive. I emailed the owner of the restaurant about what had happened and went to my shift the next day. The owner was outside the restaurant firing the manager. All on the word of a brand new employee he'd never met. I was so impressed, and the rest of my mostly young female staff were very grateful for the change. That restaurant was a great place to work, actually. 2 years later, I started my first day at my dream restaurant. Did some training, sat down for pre-shift with the kitchen, and who comes out to present the specials? It's Leo, of course. He sees me and freezes up. After pre-shift, he tried to talk to me about working together, but I went straight to my new manager and say I have a history with a current employee that they need to know about. I tell my story, I show the emails between the owner and myself, they talk to Leo about it, and he's fired again. We worked in a really specialized food style where chefs circulate through all the restaurants. He later applied to work for me when I was the hiring manager and didn't get a call back, obviously. I'm out of the industry now, but I used to dream of getting him fired again. I want to haunt him for the rest of his professional life. In short, manager tried to take advantage of me, I reported it and got him fired. 2 years later, I changed jobs to where he worked and got him fired again. Years later, reviewed his application for work, request denied. I do not forgive or forget. F you, Leo.
Landlords. Who are your tenants from hell? When I was a little kid, my parents bought a cheap house in a neighboring town and fixed it up to rent. 2 young women moved in and they were great. Just out of college, working entry level and kind of getting by, no trouble. They called at 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve because there was a spider. My dad called back when we got home from church service and asked them what they wanted him to do. They said they wanted him to kill it. So he went out on Christmas Eve to kill their spider. They seemed to think that this was normal, like about on par with what you'd expect your landlord to do if your water pipes burst on Christmas Eve. It was the least he could do given the situation. It's not a tenant from hell story by any stretch, but it does make me laugh. He told me that I wasn't allowed to move out until I could kill my own spiders, because screw that. Oh, I have a couple of tenant from hell stories. In 2007, an older couple decided to quit paying their rent. But they had pretty good excuses, so I didn't evict them until after 3 months of not paying. Finally went down to the courthouse to file an unlawful detainer on them.
We finally had our day in court. The female, who was usually dressed nicely with fake nails and an expensive weave, showed up looking like an old hag. The guy was using a walker, which made me eye-roll. This motherfricker didn't need one. And they claimed I was a slumlord and never fixed anything, but I had receipts from every repair, including a new AC unit. After I got the judgment against them, I tried to garnish the man's wages. They'd told me he worked for the Coca-Cola company. Turns out that company had never heard of him, but after a little digging I found out they'd both been arrested for selling something with a very similar name, but in a white powdery form. The officer showed me mugshots dating back to the early 80s. On their way out, they also stole the refrigerator. And then there was this past summer. I had a family of 7 move into a 5-bedroom house. They paid their deposit and the first month's rent. That's it. Haven't seen another dime from them. To top it off, they didn't get the power switched to their name, so I got more than a $400 power bill. About a month ago, I called the water company. Turns out they never had the water turned on, so they've been stealing water too. The water company pulled the meter. I'll be the one paying to have it put back. When I gave a 24-hour notice to do a walkthrough with police present, the woman answered the door and told me, "You can't come in and we'll get out when you follow all the procedures and the sheriff kicks us out." You know, I think they've done this before. Oh boy, that second group is hard for me to villainize, to be honest, because they were likely quite desperate to be resorting to back-to-back squatting with that many kids. Still, and I can't believe I'm saying this, you can't blame the landlord for kicking them out. Yes, I'm doing this video to try and get the perspective from the other side, and yes, in regular life I still err on siding with the tenants when there's any doubt. My dad owns quite a few apartment buildings throughout Colorado. One summer while I was in college, he was between managers for one of his 80-unit properties, so I acted as the stand-in manager until he hired a new one. I can't say she was the worst tenant per se, but I definitely have a few stories surrounding one woman who we'll call Kate. One day we were served a notice that Kate was taking us to the small claims court. Why? Because her in-unit washing machine wasn't working. Had she reported the problem to management? No. The maintenance man and I entered the unit that afternoon to fix the washing machine. What was the problem, you ask? It was unplugged. In the same summer, my dad woke me up at 2 a.m. saying the local police department is at the apartment on a shots fired report. When I arrive at the place, it's lit up like Christmas with squad cars. There must have been like 20 officers at the scene. What prompted the call? Kate and her bimbo friend were walking back from bars hammered. They heard 2 loud pops and decided someone was firing at them. What had actually happened? 2 guys launched a bottle rocket from a nearby balcony. Also worth noting that this happened on the 4th of July. The unit that Kate lived in was townhouse style, with the first floor consisting of 1 car garage and a staircase leading up to the living area. My dad's manager was posting a few available units on Craigslist when they happened upon another curious posting. Kate had posted the garage for rent on Craigslist under the premise that somebody could live in the garage, and they'd be able to come upstairs to use the kitchen and restroom. The manager immediately marched over there to notify Kate that her posting violated the lease, which specified no subletting, and the Colorado Housing Code, which specifies a maximum occupancy of 2 people per bedroom plus 1. Kate lived in a bedroom with her husband and child. Kate was unable to comprehend what the manager was saying. She just kept repeating, "But think of all the extra money we could make each month." My dad said she couldn't simply wrap her head around the fact that her idea would be violating a legally binding agreement and the state housing code. They had to get her husband involved to have her remove the post. Kate called us on Christmas Eve one year complaining that the heat wouldn't turn on. My dad's a good guy and doesn't mess around with things like tenants being without heat, so he immediately got up from the holiday dinner with extended family to go and fix her problem. What was the issue? The breaker for the HVAC system was flipped. Some other entertaining stories from when I was growing up. When I was young, my dad owned 3 duplexes in a row. One winter, around 1995 I believe, he noticed that the energy bill for one of the units was exorbitantly higher than the other units. He was curious about their energy consumption and paid a visit to the property one day while the tenant was at work. I clarified with my dad about this, and he did give the tenant notice 24 hours prior that he was coming to perform an annual check of the fire alarms. He entered the basement and stumbled upon hydroponics galore. He said that there were over 30 green herb plants, each with their own UV lamp and watering system. While that particular herb is legal in Colorado now, it certainly wasn't back in '95. He told the tenant that he'd be entering the basement in 2 days with a maintenance man to perform routine boiler maintenance. When he returned in 2 days, the plants and hydroponic system were gone. Growing up, my dad always told me that you could identify a grow house from a mile away because it was the only house on the block that didn't have snow on its roof. He also leased 2 or 3 units from that 80-unit apartment to the local Mormon church. The idea was that the church would house their missionaries in my dad's units while they completed their mission. As a result, the apartment inhabitants would rotate every year or so. Well, one rotation, my dad had a particularly un-Mormon batch of Mormon missionaries. This batch threw rages so loud that the noise could be heard 4 buildings away. They were also known to frequent the local escort services and associated substance scene. As you may imagine, my dad had quite the uphill battle to fight when it came to addressing the missionaries' extracurricular indiscretions with the Mormon church. I do believe he eventually did successfully evict them, though. He's also buddies with one of the local mailmen. Whenever he has a tenant that screws him over by trashing their apartment or moving out in the middle of the night, the mailman will tell my dad their new address. My dad gives the mailman a gift certificate for a steak restaurant and a nice bottle of whiskey for Christmas every year. They've had this arrangement for about 10 years. This happened to my friend's rental. This one tenant gets evicted, and instead of trashing the place, they cut off chunks of drywall, put dead fish in the walls, and seal it all back up. The tenant was a carpenter. The owners couldn't figure out the smell for weeks. They repainted, got it professionally cleaned a few times, and searched endlessly. Eventually, they figured something died in the walls and started knocking holes in them. Turned out to be that piece of crap move by the tenant. I had a tenant remove the kitchen island and bring it outside by the pool because they needed an outdoor serving area. The narrator couldn't find confirmation of what material said island was made of or how extensive the work was to get it outside, because that's potentially a whole ton of work just to move outside a mostly wooden island that would get destroyed by the weather. These tenants are more stupid than malicious, though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a crazy, manipulative tenant. She looks after the place well, but I wonder if my psychological damage is worth it. Early on in the tenancy, she complained about the shower curtain sticking to her. It's a shower-over-bath setup, and since she pays her rent reliably and keeps the place clean, we thought, oh okay, what the hell, and we paid to have a glass screen put in. We specifically instructed that the glass screen go in front of the shower head, as any sane person would, and after it's installed, I get a complaint from her about how she has to turn the shower head 45 degrees to stop the water hitting the ground. I go to inspect and find that the glass is inexplicably at the other end of the bath. Turns out she had insisted that the installer ignore our instructions and put it there for whatever fricking reason I don't know. I told her that since she had countermanded our instructions on something we were paying for, that it was now a permanent fixture in our property, that she was lucky we didn't charge her for it, and that she was going to have to live with the setup she had insisted on. She asked if she could put a cat flap in the back door. We agreed on the provision that she pay for it herself. See, we're learning. We also insisted that it be a proper cat flap, not some home dodgy version. She puts in a rubber cat flap door, which I personally wouldn't have gone with, but whatever, she's happy, so we let it go. Little did we know what that was leading towards. After the first winter in the house, she emails us copies of her electrical bills and says that the house needs better heating because her bills are too high. Looking at the bills, we agree that the house must need better heating, and we invest in a 7-kilowatt Daikin split system. She tries to tell us where to put it, and we tell her that the installers have designated this one spot as the most effective, and that we're not open to alternatives. We instruct the installers to refuse to shift the unit, see, we're still learning, unless they deem it to be superior because she's not paying for the damn thing, we are. After the installation, the installer says to us, hey, just to let you know, the reason her bills are so high last year is that she pulled the cat flap into the open position and left it hooked up that way all winter. She created a deliberate hole between the inside and outside and left it fully open for an entire season and then complained that her heating wasn't effective, all so that she could score an expensive new heater that wasn't required. At this point I started thinking, is she really that manipulative? Would anyone deliberately freeze themselves just to make me fork out thousands of dollars for new heating? Is it really that important to her to screw me over for no purpose? Surely not. Surely not. Next, she asked permission to get a dog. We said yes. She then told us she had purchased a puppy and it would be ready in 3 months, but oh hey, that side fence needs replacing or else he'll get out. The fence probably would have needed replacing within 7 or so years anyway, so we figure, okay, that's probably not entirely unreasonable, and we agree. We're not keen on the way she's manipulated things by getting us to agree to a pet and then using that to pressure us, but we take the attitude that if we get the fencing job over with now, it's done and won't be a problem later. Then she says that the neighbors are substance users, and so she wants the fence extended down the driveway to stop them hovering near her car. We see her point, the neighbors are definitely criminals and constantly in trouble with the police. So fair enough, we think, and say that we'll be looking into doing that as well. Then the neighbors were evicted a few days later, hurrah! And social services put the house up for sale. We put the fence on hold until the sale goes through. A nice bloke buys the house and starts renovating it for his family. Great guy. We replaced the fence at our expense and he helped with the labor. However, we're not learning fast enough. In fact, we're total fricking idiots because it seems that now she's not getting that dog after all. The dog ploy was sufficient to get the fence replaced, and now there's no dog necessary. She has a shiny new fence, but she's not happy. No, she wants that fence extension put in. But, we point out, the new guy is a quiet family man and no threat to anyone. There's no need for a fence extension, so we'll not be putting one in. You have a brand new fence, be happy. She is not happy. She sends me a text about a week later saying that she really needs the fence extension put in because, and I quote, "the police are all over and there's dead bodies in the street." As you can imagine, I'm floored by this. Aside from the now long evicted ferals, the house is in a nice street mostly populated by retirees. It's not by a long stretch any kind of ghetto. I ring the new neighbor to confirm and he says that no, there's no police anywhere and that street is, as usual, quiet. He questions whether perhaps my tenant is schizophrenic. God knows. Maybe. I think it's more likely she's just compulsively manipulative because she's got a very clear endgame in all of this, and she's showing remarkable dedication to coming up with complete bullcrap to achieve it. But anyway, back to the police in the streets and dead bodies everywhere issue. Turns out there was an accidental carbon monoxide death of 2 people on a boat moored at the nearby bay, and police were attending the accident. No crime, nothing but a tragedy a couple of blocks away, which was being attended to very respectfully by the authorities. I tell her that no fence extension is going to be forthcoming. End of story. Or so I think. A few weeks later, she tells me that she needs the fence extension because the neighbor's gate keeps swinging into her driveway and hitting her car. I pop around to speak with the neighbor because God knows I don't trust a single word that comes out of the tenant's mouth, and while I'm there, he demonstrates that, lo, the gate cannot in any way enter her driveway, even in a gale, even if he swung it really hard. It can't enter here or there, it can't enter anywhere on her property, because the gate is inset from the end of the fence, and there's literally no way for it to swing past that point. At this stage, I told her through gritted teeth that I've spoken with the neighbor and that her car is safe from his gate. In the 3 years she's been with us, she hasn't had a rental increase, and she's always paid substantially under the market rate because it was more important to me to get someone who looked after the property than to get the best price for it. However, I think the very next time that I get some made-up psychotic bullcrap from her that's designed to manipulate me into yet another expensive and unnecessary upgrade, her rent is going to suddenly go up to market rates. If I have to put up with any more of her crap, by gosh, she's going to start paying for it. And if it means that she moves on and I take my chances with a new person, then so be it. I've already checked with the tenancy tribunal here, and I could put up the rent by $50 a week to match the market rate without them so much as blinking. And that's just to make it market comparable with the houses that don't have new fences and expensive heating. She's gone radio silent for a few months now. I hope that maybe she's finally worked out that she's on a ridiculously sweet deal and should quit while she's massively ahead. Okay, so that, my friends, is what it looks like when one tenant has enough issues to fill up nearly a third of our video's runtime. Ridiculously patient landlord. I thought I'd forever be on the side of tenants in these kinds of situations, but it just goes to show that some landlords really do go through hell just trying to be decent managers. My mum had some tenants in a rental property who apparently were serial crapsacks and would live in a place until they got evicted, then move on to the next place. They'd do things like not pay rent while claiming the AC was broken or some other property-related issue, and then avoid actually letting it be examined or fixed. Long story short, after getting evicted, they waited until the very last minute to move out, left a bunch of their stuff behind, and filled a microwave with hot dogs which they left to rot. While my mum was in the process of getting a court order, the TV show Hot Bench, a Judge Judy spin-off, called and asked them to come on. Everyone got flown out to LA and my mum got her money and the crapsacks got berated on national daytime TV. So I suppose it worked out in the end. A tenant rented an apartment that didn't come with a parking space. An apartment in the building that did come with a parking space became available. He asked if he could have it. I told him it would be an extra amount per month, and he then started posting propaganda all over the property about the injustices that I supposedly committed for not giving him a parking space for free. He tried to get other tenants to sign a petition that would make me give up my parking space on the property. He then took us to court. He lost, but not without just a freaking nightmare of his crap personality and sociopathic tendencies. The most annoying aspect of it all was the fact that he was this bullcrap hippie dude who was all about peace and positive vibes and teaching yoga and stuff. Wrong him though, and he was the most toxic human being you'll ever meet. I used to have a job that involved cleaning and minor repairs of rental apartments and houses between tenants. Usually it was easy enough, but the ones who were evicted often made it a point to wreck the place on the way out. One particular jerk decided to pack plumber's putty into the sink and bathtub drains, and then turn the taps on before he left. They had to get professional contractors to fix most of it, but I got to rip out a bunch of stinky wet carpet and water-damaged floorboards. My parents had some tenants when I was probably 7 or 8 that never paid the rent, and they wound up getting evicted. My parents decided that they'd save some money and we'd just clean the place up ourselves. This was their worst idea ever. I didn't know what a lot of the stuff I saw that day was until much later in life. The first thing I saw when we walked in the door was a fish tank full of dead exotic fishies. In the bedroom, we found used bedroom protection, sanitary products, and needles, like just lying around. Once we saw that bedroom, my parents gave up and hired a professional cleaner, but I heard what else they found. They found a cat shoved into the toilet of the master bathroom. It was terrible. I used to work in lettings. We had a young couple move into a house. They were young and were using benefits to pay their rent, but the landlord wanted to give them a chance. 2 months later, we got a call from a locksmith contracted by the police. The police had raided the house the night before because the young man was a dealer. They had literally smashed the front door frame out of the wall, and the locksmith had been called in to make good. We called the girl. The young man was in police custody and she couldn't afford the rent and wanted out of both the tenancy and the relationship. We made a house visit to check the state of the door. It was pretty bad. They had a dog in a house with a no pets policy, and it had been shut in a bedroom a lot. Turds and chew marks and scratch marks everywhere. They'd smoked a bunch, we had a no smoking policy, and the house stunk of stale cigarettes. The landlord agreed to let them out of the tenancy and get the house back on the market. It cost thousands to put the house right. New front door, redecorate, all new carpets. It was just about ready to advertise when we had a call from the neighbor. There had been a disturbance the night before and he'd had to call the cops. The young man, being released from police custody and unable to get back with his girlfriend, had broken back into the property a couple of days earlier to squat. He had then had a visit from his supplier he owed a lot of money to. His supplier ended up attacking him. He almost bled to death on the brand new cream carpets. Once we had got more new carpets in and fixed the broken window from where he'd broken in, we found a new, reputable tenant. A nice young man who was actually a substance counselor, which turned out to be good because a lot of the local users didn't get the memo about their dealer being arrested and then attacked. So he had a lot of visitors in the beginning and knew how to deal with them. There was also a single mum with some pretty serious issues who tried to burn the house down. Luckily, they all got out alive and she got help. And finally, another guy threatened to attack me because he owed rent and couldn't pay, and I made him feel guilty. He got a visit from the cops, what with me knowing where he lived and all. But my favorite story was the tenants who lost their postbox key. The landlord posted them a new one. 2-bedroom unit rented to 2 girls, grown women mind you, with jobs. They complained that there were roaches. The previous tenant had had no roach problems. We'd even cleaned it and seen none. So we get it taken care of, and they still complained they were there. Now, we're thinking she or her roommate brought them. Skip to them both leaving on October 31st. We get the key and check the unit. It's trashed. They left behind a bunch of bottles on the counter, glasses, plates, cutlery, clothes, shoes, food just all over the place, and roaches. Lots of roaches. We called the junk removers. They don't remove unless it's roach-free. So we called pest control. They advised to remove things before they do their jobs. Frick my life. My parents have owned properties for a while, so there's a number, but the one that I'm personally invested in is the last tenant. They decided to rent out my childhood home, and I suggested it to a coworker. I'd worked with this woman for several years and thought she and her family were decent people. I trusted them. They brought bed bugs into the place, did quite a bit of damage to the walls, and also pulled out and sold the 100-year-old hardwood trim. They removed the central air unit and sold it, and just generally messed the place up. They then proceeded to skip town after being kicked out once they found out that their wages were being garnished. Show up to your court dates, kids. Having tenants leave behind a pile of trash, horrifying bathrooms, and holes in the walls is common, but I hold a bit of a grudge on this one specifically. Americans. What makes you glad that you don't live in Europe? In America, I'm really glad that almost everything is open on Sundays. I lived in Germany for a few months and didn't plan groceries right that first weekend. Grocery store was closed. I didn't have anything to eat, so I walked into town to find a restaurant, and the only thing open was Pizza Hut. I don't even like Pizza Hut when I'm in the US. So the narrator's first video on this channel was things that outsiders find really weird about the States. So, in the spirit of fairness, let's see if we hold up over here under the scrutiny of our friends from across the pond. Let us have it, Americans. Being a second-generation Ukrainian, one thing America has that Ukraine doesn't is a societal norm to not drive or park on the sidewalks. As someone who's been to Greece quite a few times, Greek drivers. Holy crap, they do whatever they feel like on the road, whenever they feel like it. Things closing really early. I was at a coffee shop doing homework when studying abroad. By about 3, they came up to me and kicked me out since they were about to close. In the US, coffee shops are often open pretty late for people to study in, so that was weird to me. Other than that, I think living in Europe would be wonderful. It's been years since I've been to Europe. Hell, the last time I was there was before places in the States started banning smoking. But I do remember a ton of smoking there. I know this isn't all of Europe, but I'm glad that in the States we don't have those taps that have 2 separate spouts for hot and cold, with 2 faucets. They just seem like such an inconvenience. Nothing quite like washing your hands as fast as you can under the hot tap before the water reaches the heat of 1,000 suns and melts your skin off. As a disabled person, all the damn stairs. I'd love to visit France, but the stairs. The price of gas, or for my buddies across the pond, petrol. I always see American prices and think, how much? And remember that you charge by the gallon and we charge by the liter, although I think we're probably paying double what you are after that. I mean, we don't have Piers Morgan here. Please don't let him come back. A lot of places in Europe don't have air conditioning, even though they could really use it. Paying ridiculous amounts of money for a driver's license in Germany. Yeah, I mean here we give them out in freaking cereal boxes. Canadian here. I love Europe, but the population density and crowds there is enough to drive me crazy. Don't get me wrong, there are places that are less populous, but there's nothing like going out into the Canadian country and not seeing another soul. When I was young, I met an exchange student from Austria who commented that one of the things she loved about Canada is that you can drive for hours and still not be in another city. One of the things I'd loved about visiting Europe was that there always seemed to be another interesting town just down the road. Kind of a grass is greener sort of thing, I guess. How much people over there smoked. The lack of accessibility for people with physical disabilities. I lived in the UK, specifically London, for a few months and I'd always think, how is a person with a wheelchair supposed to get through this city? The drying machines that you guys have or don't have for your laundry. I lived in the UK for a couple of years with 2 kids and no dryer at all. It rains there most days, so the outdoor clothes line was next to useless as well. A minor inconvenience in the greater scheme of things, but still pretty inconvenient after what I was used to. I recently visited the UK again and went to use the laundry facilities at our Airbnb. Again, no dryer. And no clothesline either. Had to drape our damp clothes over every radiator, chair, and windowsill in the place for 2 days before anything was wearable. No screens in windows. You don't realize how much you miss them until there's a pigeon in your flat. Pickpockets. I only carry used tissues in my pockets when in Europe. I found them missing more than once and I laugh at the motherfrickers because they're holding my snot whilst my money is snugly tucked away in my prison pocket, which makes it awkward at the sandwich cart, but whatever. Paying to use a toilet, loo. The lack of good Mexican food. It's so much better in the US. Whether it's authentic or American Mexican, it's so bomb. Europe misses out on this, and it's sad. Old people walking slowly on the sidewalk. Our old people here in the US are conveniently trapped at home, often with few means of mobility. It's great, apart from Florida. France is an amazing place that's in a shocking state of disrepair. The stoplight under the Louvre is loomed with brown duct tape. Every building needs to be power washed and the highways have weeds growing on them. The entire place could use a new curb and gutter. It's amazing that they're amongst the most heavily taxed nations on the planet, yet things are in disrepair and you get charged an arm and a leg to use the motorways. I think there's a certain age your buildings can get to where power washing would probably be pretty detrimental, but your point is taken. Myself, I kinda like how dirty certain older cities can seem. It feels like character to me. As to where the tax money goes, I don't know. Sound off, French people. From my few trips to Europe, only France and Greece, I'm happy that we don't have the high smoker to non-smoker ratio, the sheer density of population they have in some places, the water scarcity, so many tourists. I know tourism is good for the national economy, but I'd go crazy if I couldn't access my favorite spots because there are always tourists in the way. And finally, that warm weather. It's too much. The lack of public lands and wilderness areas, and the general lack of wildlife. In the States, the public holds ownership of 640 million acres of incredible landscapes, and all wildlife is publicly owned, managed in trust by different agencies. I can plant my feet anywhere on that ground and feel completely free. It's as much mine as anyone else's. I've spent a lot of time in Europe, including 2 18-month stints in Budapest and Rotterdam. I love a lot of the culture, the architecture, and history. I fully plan to return to visit. I'm just unable to live somewhere long-term where I can't take to the wilderness and roam free whenever I want. It might be the most beautiful thing about the United States. This isn't an attack on Europeans or some kind of blame game. This is an incredibly important subject. It deserves a nuanced conversation, not social media's forte. I encourage you to do your own exploring and research, see what's worked and what hasn't. The truth is, the US got lucky early on. We had a president and a large group of outdoors people who recognized that we were about to effectively eliminate wild places during westward expansion, and they did something about it. They assigned value to these places before it was too late and managed to enshrine it as a chief American value. European peoples, my ancestors among them, had a lot more time to settle and resettle most of the continent before Western civilization had the luxury to start thinking ahead. There's also great European organizations working to increase, restore, and improve what remains in the wilderness realm. It's a totally different experience from the US right now. I've only been to Europe once, specifically Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. There's a lot that they do better, but the one thing I didn't like was that sparkling water is somewhat standard there, and also that they don't ice their drinks. I can deal with no free refills and the fact that water isn't free, and I was prepared for that. But I hate sparkling water. I didn't know I had to ask for no gas at first, and that was an unpleasant surprise. Wash-down toilets rather than siphonic toilets. Basically, American toilets, or the siphonic ones, flush using the siphon effect of water to forcibly remove the bowl contents. European toilets, wash-down, flush by running a bunch of water through the bowl and praying that the contents go away. My wife and I were starving and went to a Burger King in Italy. Everything was just like any other Burger King except for when we sat down and took out all our food, we couldn't find the ketchup. So I looked all over for the ketchup near the soda machine, but no go. Finally, I had to break down and bother the serving person for some. Turns out you have to pay for ketchup packs. The server saw the shock on my face and actually apologized, needlessly as it wasn't her fault. Other than that, I loved everything about Italy. Okay, to answer all the replies I'm getting, I hate to do this, but due to the unending parade of morons who just can't fathom that an American would dare to eat fast food in Italy, I spent 2 weeks in Italy. My wife and I ate out every single night and we sampled all of the great food that Italy has to offer. We literally ate our way through Milan, Monza, and Lake Como. Except for one fricking night. You see, we checked out of our hotel in Milan and drove straight to Monza to attend the Italian Grand Prix. Due to the parking situation at Monza, we had to park at a soccer stadium a few miles from the track, and from there take a shuttle that drops you off still 1 mile from the stands, leaving you to walk the rest of the way. We had an Airbnb waiting for us in Lake Como, and our hosts were waiting for us, and it was still over an hour drive from the track. So, after walking a mile out, riding the shuttle again, and having not eaten all day and not wanting to keep our hosts waiting, we opted for Burger King, which was directly across the street from the stadium parking lot. It's sad that I'd even need to explain this, and sadder still that 20 fricking idiots simply can't fathom the possibility that someone in Italy might want fast food once in a while, or have other reasons for choosing a quick meal. I'm sorry for all you petty trolls and your small, miserable existences. Okay, although I'm laughing a little bit at this commenter's fury, I do understand their sentiment. I assume that Burger King exists in Italy because sometimes on a blue moon, those culinary gods and goddesses do in fact eat it. Otherwise, it couldn't survive, not even on the massive tourist population there. Italians eat Burger King, so let's go easy on this guy. How hard it is to get meals outside of mealtime. In America, regardless of what hour of the day it is, you can be reasonably sure of finding some kind of restaurant open. Even at 2 a.m. you can find a Denny's or something. Most restaurants, outside of really fancy places, don't close down between mealtimes, so you can go in at any time during operating hours to get food. Compare that to places where all the restaurants are only open during mealtime hours, and you're out of frickin' luck if you get hungry at 10 in the morning. The last time I left the USA was in the 90s, and things might be different now, but that's what frustrated me about my trip. And the number of people writing to me, just buy groceries and make your own food, when I'm talking about an experience on a vacation is astounding. Of course I'd just make my own food if stuff was closed and I lived there, that's what I do at home. You're a bit limited when you're on vacation though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Well, I am European, well I was until a few weeks ago, thanks Brexit, but I hate how in some countries such as Spain, Turkey and Greece, the sewage system can't handle toilet paper, so you're expected to put it in a bin besides the toilet. I remember being at a water park in Corfu, and the bin was overflowing with used toilet paper. Nasty stuff. My experience in London included walking back to my hotel at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday and seeing lots of people at the bar across the street drinking, and then going out at 10 a.m. on the Wednesday morning and seeing a lot of people at the bar still drinking. If having a drink with friends makes you happy, by all means go and do that. Personally, how much drinking I saw in London made little Miss Priss me a bit uncomfortable. Okay, breathe, people. If you're that annoyed about a stranger commenting on it, go have a drink and blow off some steam. There's a sense of claustrophobia I get in Europe. Everything seems tighter. Doorways, streets, alleys, hallways. The hotel I stayed at in Rome had a bed that wouldn't have been acceptable for the most budget motel in the US. There's a sense of being taken advantage of at restaurants with nickel and diming. Bread? That's a charge. Butter with your bread? Another charge. The US has plenty of issues, but I like the wide open spaces. Since I seem to be hurting people's feelings, I do really like your border guards. They're very welcoming and friendly. I apologize for what a rude welcome Europeans get when they arrive in the US. Also, I concede that some issues are related to old cities and tourist traps, and things might be better in the countryside. So here's a list of things I liked and didn't like about your specific country or city to give a more nuanced and positive review. Rome, I liked the Pane el Salame restaurant. I spent 2 hours and 20 euros on a bottle of wine and a giant charcuterie board. Favorite restaurant in Europe. I disliked that bed at the hotel that I mentioned. In Venice, I liked the unlimited Prosecco the hotel provided on their rooftop balcony overlooking the city. And I disliked the food. Worst pizza I've ever had. In Ireland, I liked the wittiness of the Irish and watching the girls there shoot my buddy down in funny ways. I disliked the drunks screaming at the top of their lungs for half an hour at 5 a.m. outside the hotel window in Dublin. In Barcelona, I liked the affordable, beautiful Jamon, Estrella, beaches, and the metro. I disliked… you know what, I can't think of anything for Barcelona. In Switzerland, I liked the trains being plentiful and on schedule, the mountains, the affordable skiing. I disliked getting charged $2 for tap water in Zurich at a restaurant. In France, I liked the amount of care and seriousness the French put into what they make, from macarons to croissants. I loved the history, like seeing the old walls of Paris in an underground parking garage. Like, that kind of history is just normal in everyday life. Raclette after a day of skiing is amazing. I disliked the Senegalese beggars and the feeling that most French were all annoyed that I existed. In Lisbon, there was nothing noteworthy either way. Graz in Austria, I liked Gosser beer. You just can't find it in the US. And in Prague, cheap beer, beautiful city at night. I didn't like the Uber guy trying to scam me by driving me 45 minutes through the countryside for a 15-minute ride to the airport. Didn't like that only 2 kinds of beer were available, light or dark. And in Munich, good food, I guess? I disliked the conditions of the hotel, and Germans have weird toilets. The turds just drop onto a little shelf. Paying for public restrooms. Honestly, I wonder how the elderly manage being out and about. My grandparents and stepmother pee about every 30 minutes, sometimes more. And it would cost a small fortune while traveling, as most restrooms I saw were at least €2. Sometimes €5 to use. This was in December of 2016. I was in primarily Germany and Belgium, and my blah blah car host told me that the UK was similar. Germany's train stations consistently smelled of stale pee, and I suspect this was a consequence of having to pay to use the restroom. A clean restroom is nice, but if the result of requiring payment is people just peeing in open spaces, I also don't think the trade-off is worth it. No American lemonade. Apparently some restaurants will just serve you something similar to Sprite if you request lemonade in some countries in Europe. This is because in Europe, lemonade is a completely different beverage. I only learned this the other week on the internet, but our lemonade is generally a clear, sparkling, carbonated liquid. From what I can gather, the lemonade you guys have over there is quite difficult to get a hold of over here. Lots of shops here in the UK sell Sicilian lemon, which is a cloudy yellow flat liquid that is tarter than lemonade. It sounds similar to the descriptions I've read of American lemonade. It kind of boggled my mind that I've grown up consuming American media for the past 20 years and yet never realized that lemonade meant a very different thing to you guys until literally last week. I'm curious, is lemonade used as a mixer in alcoholic drinks over there in the States? It's probably the second or third most popular over here after Coca-Cola and possibly tonic water, but I can't imagine vodka with Sicilian lemon going down quite so easily. Some of these comments really show just how misinformed Americans can be. Okay, so while the narrator, as a rule, greatly prefers life over here in his undisclosed European country, he doesn't think that the points our friends from the US are making are completely invalid. Being a tourist in some parts of the EU is very different to living here, and back when I was a lowly backpacker, I kind of had a lot of the same complaints. We can't blame them for experiencing the brunt of all the tourist stuff that we specifically target them with. Drinks not having ice in them. Cold drinks are where it's at. You can't just get a glass of water at a restaurant there. You have to pay for a bottle. That was the most annoying thing about Europe to me. Which country did you go to? You can certainly get a glass of water for free in the UK as it's required by law. Nothing really. As a middle-class worker, my life would actually be a lot better in Europe. Free healthcare. That's whack, yo. Yes, this is a joke. As a Brit now living in the US for the last 6.5 years, there are many things I don't miss about home, including an obvious one, but yes, the population density, just feeling overcrowded all the time, too many people smoking in public and carelessly around young children, also the crazy price of petrol, rain year-round. It rains a bit here too, but nowhere near as much. I don't miss it getting dark at 3:30 p.m. in the winter either. The litter everywhere and just the general lack of care about surroundings. Gum and spit on pavements is especially disgusting. I also don't miss the lack of variety with ethnic restaurants. I know I'm somewhat spoiled for choice in my area, but back home it was Indian, Chinese, or Nando's if you didn't want a kebab or fish and chips. There's probably more, but that'll do for now. All of the weirdo beggars who just use little tricks to get you to give them money, all dressed up and painted silver, fake handicaps, gypsies tying stuff to my arm and following me around with it, street artists. If I had to deal with these obscenities every single day, I'd lose my freaking cool and go Beyblade on their butts. European street layouts. It adds character to a city, but it's a total witch to navigate, especially when driving. Your seemingly lax justice system for truly horrific crimes. If someone is kidnapped and tortured, the victim of the unspeakable act and then murdered by someone, it should either be the government putting that person down or it's going to be me. There's nothing that can convince me otherwise. I get your personal feelings, but objectively, you're completely wrong. Prison shouldn't be about punishment, but about reintroduction into society. In the US, reoffending rates are extremely high at around 70%. For contrast, it's like 20% in Norway. I get your personal feelings don't agree with this, but the European system just works so much better. I'm glad we don't have British people. Enough said. A new language every state. The EU. Who needs Germans making decisions for Greece? The fact that you can be criminally charged for hate speech in some countries, Article 13, the out-of-control immigration in some of the others, pickpockets, and how expensive some things are. Also, as a hobby shooter, I dislike the weapon laws over there. God damn it, those pesky lawmakers taking away my hate speech, it's so oppressive. Never been, but I watch an unhealthy amount of traveling shows, and sometimes I'm shocked at how small the kitchens are. Also, the driving seems very scary in some places. Europeans who absolutely crap all over Americans when there's questions like, what about the US is weird to Europeans, but can't take it when Americans throw in their 2 cents. I'm an American who's been to 14 countries in Europe, many of them more than once, because I genuinely love to travel over there, and to be honest, I don't have much to complain about. I haven't really encountered much rudeness because I expect a more cold approach from Europeans as a general personality trait, so it doesn't bother me. Someone on the metro in Rome tried to get their hands in my downstairs area once. That kinda sucked, but I still returned a year later because really that can happen anywhere to a woman. I think the most off-putting thing to happen to me was in Paris last year when I had to defend a friend who was being bothered by someone trying to sell her something on Champ de Mars near the Eiffel Tower. I speak French and told him to leave her alone. He proceeded to scream in my face and attempted to shine a laser pointer in my eyes for the next 30 minutes. That really sucked. Viewing from the Trocadero area seems a bit more pleasant. All in all, I've had wonderful times in Europe, but it seems as though many Europeans grow more hostile towards Americans as each day passes, so I probably won't return for a while and will instead look into visiting more of South America in the future. If Americans are so dumb and suck so much, I, as a traveler, will simply go elsewhere. Okay, so I went to France for a school trip, and I could accept the extreme amounts of bread, the lack of hospitality, the lack of free refills, but I couldn't understand the smaller cars. Like, they look the same everywhere, and even the American cars there are smaller. After a while, I thought I just didn't sleep enough and they were normal size. I got so used to those cars and figured I was insane. Once I got back to the US, I almost screamed when I saw a real truck and realized I wasn't crazy. What's your, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me story? I was rock climbing and this guy who was my belayer for the day was kind of a jerk. Well, no surprise, the guy spends most of his time flirting with a cute girl who's friendly, but seriously not into him. He gets chewed out by our lead for not paying attention, which means he continues to not pay attention as he's incapable of picking up cues. Well, there's me, 25 feet or so off the ground with my rope slack and feeling my hands slipping because I'm just running out of steam. Now, having told him 3 times to pick up the slack, I look down and I see that he's completely ignoring me to chat with this girl again. My mistake was looking down as I reached to readjust my weakening hold and I slipped. The rope shoots out of his limp, sausage-like fingers and I begin to fall. I know a properly tied-off rope shouldn't do that, and I guess he messed that up too. My only thought was, if I'm going to fall, I'm gonna damn well land on him. Well, I did. I landed straight on his cushy jerk body. I was barely injured, by the way. He was taken to hospital after having 80-odd kilos of me land on him from 2 stories up. You know, I never happened to see him at that rock climbing club again. Wow, I mean, you took the going down quite literally here.
I once worked for a startup company and they missed one of my paychecks. It wasn't a gigantic deal to me because they were a bit strapped for cash and we had a big release coming soon, and I was decently paid anyway, so I just said, screw it. They then fired me 2 days before release, making it sound like I'd been inadequate despite zero indication from them that I was such before that day. So I made the proper legal arrangements to recoup my missing paycheck and told them I'd be going to Labour and Industry. I'd already filed a complaint. Because if they were going to fire me out of nowhere after I worked 70 hours a week for over a month to try to meet their deadlines, I sure as frick wasn't going to cut them the slack of an entire paycheck. I got my paycheck, they went out of business because they were corrupt and had been misusing investor funds for years, and this was unbeknownst to me by the way, and I laughed all the way to the bank. When I was stationed in Korea, my sergeant threatened to tell command I was drinking underage. Fortunately, I had pictures of our squad drinking and he was present in them, so I told him I'd show them to command if he told on me. Checkmate, Sarge. Now hand me another beer. Whenever you're going to turn someone in for a crime, make sure there isn't direct photographic evidence of you being completely complicit in it. I'm notorious in my friend group for having a fear of water. I'm okay in pools since you can hopefully see the bottom, but even shallow lakes, rivers, and oceans are a no-go for me. Some of my friends ended up renting a boat and they wanted to take it out on the lake and begged me to come out. I kept telling them no way in heck would I ever willingly go out and sit in the middle of a lake. Finally, I caved because, I don't know, they were friends and they really wanted me to go. Someone said it could help me face my fears. Even though I didn't plan on getting in the water, I'm not going to wear jeans to the sunny beach, so I left my wallet, keys, and phone in the car. Within 10 minutes of getting to the middle of the lake, the buddy who suggested I face my fears, and I think his brother, asked me if I've got the time. I shrug and tell them I left my phone back in the car. They both lunge at me and start throwing me overboard. I latch on for dear life and fight as if the river is lava because to me, essentially it is. I eventually realize that I'm going in 100% and there's nothing I can do. So, I let go of the railing I was gripping onto and instead grab them both as I'm pulled back and I force all three of us into the water. Getting back on the boat was easy. It had a little ramp and ladder for climbing in and out, and you can bet your butt I was the first one climbing back up. The brothers were mad at me because they had their phones in their pockets and I ruined them. But everyone else quickly pointed out that they pushed me in the water knowing I hated it, and they deserved it. They argued that they intentionally tried to make sure I didn't have anything electronic on me, but everyone shut them down. They were allowed back on the boat when they apologized. My friend apologized and I actually did chip in to help him get a new phone later, but his brother swam back to shore and got even more upset and demanded I pay for his new phone since I helped his brother. But he didn't feel bad or think he did anything wrong, so screw that guy. When I worked as a case manager as an MHMR, we had a new department supervisor come in and she was the worst. Every single person but myself and another case manager quit within the month of this woman starting. I really liked my job and it was also my internship site for my master's degree, so I needed to stay employed there. Since so many people quit, this lady got permission to hire, and it soon became obvious that she wanted to get rid of anyone she hadn't hired and have a department full of people she had personally chosen. Surprise, surprise, most of her hires were crappy, just like her. On top of being an awful human, she also had very little background in mental health and gave truly awful supervision when it came to clients and getting them the services they needed. Since I wasn't a part of the people she had hired, I knew she'd try to get rid of me, so I made sure to document everything. Anytime I staffed a client with her, I'd document her advice in that person's chart, as well as the actions I took due to her advice. I also kept a detailed paper trail and would email her questions about policy so that I'd have a record of her answers, which usually were the opposite of what our policy actually was. She'd even start walking to my desk to verbally give me answers to the questions I sent via email, and I'd have to make up some excuse as to why I needed her answer in an email. Like, I'd tell her a parent or a client had asked and I wanted to be able to give them a verbatim answer, and I could tell that she hated that. Anyway, several months later, I staffed a client with her who I believed needed to be hospitalized, and I wanted to run it by her first as she demanded. The kid had a number of highly dangerous and volatile issues that I believed were a ticking time bomb. She disagreed that this kid needed hospitalization and told me to refer the client to another agency because apparently the client was too high risk for us. Too high risk, but didn't need to be hospitalized? I tried to get her to agree to just call in crisis to assess her, but she denied that as well. I documented what she had told me to do and referred out. Well, literally a day later, this kid brings a piece to school and gets in a ton of trouble, obviously. Thankfully, he was stopped as soon as he stepped through the metal detectors. His mum is angry that my agency just referred him and didn't get him the help he needed, and that a day later he went to try and blast up his school. My supervisor's supervisor is angry as this is a PR nightmare and comes down on my supervisor, but since I was the direct care staff assigned to this client, she blamed it all on me. I ended up getting fired for my, quote, negligence. However, the higher-ups, of course, carefully went through the kid's records and saw all of my documentation regarding the awful decisions my supervisor had made, which led the higher-ups to investigate even more. Basically, there was Medicaid fraud being committed, this lady was lying about her mileage, and being reimbursed way more than she should have been, and all this other lovely stuff. So she was fired as well. I was asked to come back, but frick that place and frick its corruption. When I was in the 8th grade, we had to create a presentation on a book we'd just read, including a skit from one of the scenes. Here's the best part. We were forced to work in groups. Being an introvert, I hate group work. What I hate even more is when your group mates don't do their work. The day we were assigned the project, we decided to divvy up the slides equally. It was a Google Slides, so we could all contribute to the same document. The class ended, and I'd already finished one of my slides. One boy only changed the color of his title, and the other two didn't do anything. 2 days later, I'd finished all of my slides. No one else had done anything. I offered to start the script for the skit since I'd finished, and asked for the others to contribute. Nothing. A couple more days passed, I'd finished the skit as well, and all of the other slides were still empty. Finally, the night before the assignment was due came, I'd hoped that even a title had been added. The slides were still empty. I finally decided to just finish it myself. I was up until about midnight and the slides were not the best quality. Finally, the presentation day comes. Of course, my group mates felt absolutely no remorse for doing no work. It was our turn to present, and my group mates nominated me to present. I finally decided to show them the consequences of their actions. I told them that we were all to present the slides we were supposed to work on. They obviously didn't know what they were doing and were extremely unprepared. My grade went down, but theirs went down even more. There's an old university saying, "At my funeral, I want my group project members to be my pallbearers so they can let me down one last time. We all salute you for lurching out of the coffin and punching them all in the twig and berries on the way down, author." When I was in university, I did a 6-month exchange program in Spain. I took 4 classes while I was there, and all had an equivalent credit at my university in Canada. I was getting A's on all of my classes except one class where I was really struggling, and getting a failing grade on an assignment in that class finally broke me. The professor of this class was the worst. It was an intermediate Spanish class, and he was marking us like he thought we should all be writing Shakespeare. Not only that, but how he told us to complete assignments versus how he marked them would be completely incongruent. He expected us to be doing things that he never taught us, and he shouldn't have been expecting in the first place from an intermediate Spanish class. I realized it wasn't just my problem when the girl from France, whose Spanish was far better than anyone else's, started crying one day after she got an assignment back and begged to understand why she was marked so poorly. He just pointed at her assignment like it was the only explanation required, and then ignored her after that. There was no way to drop the class or switch into another one because of the way it was built into the exchange program, so I decided I'd start emailing the teacher constantly after he gave us assignments, clarifying every little point, coming back with follow-up questions to try and figure out what the heck it was he actually wanted from us. I was spending way more time on assignments than they deserved. This way, if I failed, I'd have this record showing how hard I was working in the class to bring to an administration if I needed to fight it, and all the discrepancies between how he provided assignments versus how he marked them. A couple of days before the final exam teacher evaluation forms came around, I could tell by how long it took us all to turn them in that I wasn't the only one in class unloading on this guy. This was his first semester teaching at the university, so if his teacher evaluations didn't go well, he wouldn't be invited back. If I failed this class, then at least that jerk wouldn't be doing this to someone else next semester. We get our final marks a week later, and I've managed to pull a C- out of my butt. Great, just squeaked by. Then with final marks dispersed, he's allowed to see his teacher evaluations. He sent an email to the entire class that night and lost his fricking mind. We're talking about sections with all caps, multiple exclamation marks, telling us how stupid we all are and how we don't know what we're talking about, how he's the greatest teacher alive and we're all just bad students. Complete meltdown. The next morning, I found another email from the university this time, stating that Professor Jerkface is no longer with the university and won't be welcome back again, followed by numerous apologies regarding his behavior. I inquired about our grades in light of what happened, but I guess they weren't that apologetic because they refused to change them. Go figure.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Current job, previous manager. I was on a team of 2 when the lady I worked alongside with quit, and they decided not to replace her. I have a young child who, as children so often do, gets sick a lot. Being the only person on my team and the most important role of our office to function, since it's literally the first step in all of our processes, I had a very hard time whenever I used my paid time off with a short notice. I'd given my manager multiple ways to fix the issue, but she'd never hear any of it. She also was in a remote office, so she had zero clue what I did with my day. She finally sent me a very angry email, basically telling me I couldn't use my paid time off for emergencies all the time when my son got sick. I wrote back, detailed a list of every method I suggested to fix the issue, along with the fact that I was the only person in my position for months, and that our company policy states in bold letters that using paid time off because you or your loved one is sick is not only acceptable, but encouraged. My manager responded to my email by stating that she had forwarded my concerns to HR and that I should probably polish up my resume. But HR was in our office that day, for the first time in 6 months. Great coincidence, right? So I went in, asked if I could speak about an issue concerning my manager, and explained everything as it happened. The HR rep had this look on her face like she was going to murder someone. She asked me to forward the entire email chain to her, which I did. Then she called me back in to talk to her. A few people I talked to were aware that the manager and I had issues, and the lead of every team in our office basically told the HR rep that the entire office can't function without me, and that I've been doing the work of 3 people for 9 months. Later that day, my manager sent me a very angry message over email, basically saying I was fired and that I was to pack my things immediately for failing to do my job and because I was causing a hostile work environment. I forwarded this to the HR rep and then walked to her office and asked if I should pack my stuff. She looked at me and in a single sweet sentence said, "Not a chance, she's royally effed." And that's basically how my manager went from making $80K a year to being fired on a Wednesday with no compensation, no benefits, and no way to collect unemployment. All around, a productive day. My dad pushed me into the pool, but before I fell in, I grabbed his arm. In 7th grade, my teacher decided to use process drama to teach about the events leading to persecution of certain peoples in Germany before World War II. He told us we could hide anywhere in the building, and if we successfully evaded him looking for us, we'll get a bunch of extra credit. Conversely, if we're caught, we'll get 5 points for each other classmate we rat out. I hid successfully in the computer class under a spare TV cart that could barely fit me. My soon-to-not-be friend had chosen poorly in the same room and was easily found. Upon walking out, I very clearly remember him yelling, "Wait! Yams is in the corner under the cart." I can't remember being so mad at someone before. I was ratted out for a mere 5 points. I yelled at him and definitely overreacted. The lesson being a process drama, that was kind of the point. To experience the fear and potential rage at your neighbors ratting you out. For those of you who don't know, this lesson's style is to give students first-hand emotional connection to whatever content you'd like to teach. It's incredibly effective. In short, I was taken down along with a classmate, and I lost my extra credit. That's actually a really good and memorable way to demonstrate to a student certain things about humanity, and maybe strengthen their resolve to not be the bad guys in the future. Practical lessons like this are still some of my strongest memories from classes from school. I was at a church camping trip for boys at Yosemite. One of the guys in charge was new and a real D-bag. He made it his goal in life to punish every kid. I was a real rule follower, so he couldn't punish me and started actually getting angry about that. He'd even drop comments like, "Your turn is coming." Now, when I was younger, I was really thin and small, but in my mind I was like all the other kids and mentally tough, so this got me in trouble.
I'd get injured in these trips, and the head guy was always getting in trouble with my parents for not keeping me safe. So one of the rules is that nobody can ever be alone. If you're caught alone at any time, you're in trouble. So we're getting the campfire ready for lunch, and some kid comes running up to the group and says that there's an undressed woman bathing in the river. All of the other kids get up and run to go see. So to not be alone, I have to go with the group. Now, I don't go to the edge and look because I didn't feel like it was right to go spy on some poor woman just trying to enjoy nature. Anyway, D-Bag leader sees this as his opportunity and says that since I got up and went over with the group, I was also in trouble, despite the fact that I had no other choice. Punishment at this camp was holding a giant rock over your head. Somehow I was the only one that got in trouble. Not everyone else that looked, proving that he didn't care about actual rules, but just that he had power over everyone. I was supposed to hold this rock over my head for 15 minutes and then come back. Of course, he was too lazy to oversee punishments, so I was supposed to do this alone, which is another problem since there are bears and preverts around. No kid is supposed to be alone there. Finally, since I didn't deserve the punishment, I decided I was going to take this guy down. So I dropped the rock on my head on purpose. Then I just laid there. I could feel a large bump rising on my head. I must have laid there for about 35 minutes. Finally, they realized I didn't show up for lunch, and someone asked where I was, and then everyone ran over to see me laying there with a rock next to my head. I said that the last thing that I remembered is that my arms were getting weak holding the rock over my head. Then the leader checked my head and found the bump. He was livid because now he had to tell my mom I got hurt again. When asked why I was holding a rock over my head, I made sure to let them know that it was the D-Bag leader's punishment. He tried to deny it, but 25 young voices called him a liar simultaneously, since they'd all endured the same punishment. D-Bag leader was stripped of his power and spent the rest of the camp as just another camper. In fact, he called someone and left a day early. It was his first and last activity with the group. My uncle used to own a hardware store in our crappy little town. He wanted to put up a cover between two buildings that he owned, but the town council wouldn't let him. They never gave any real reason, like we need to leave the area uncovered because of XYZ building codes. They just went on a power trip and said, "You're not gonna do it." Eventually, due to some other power trips, my uncle threatened to move his shop a few towns over. The town council went, "You're not gonna do it," in a kind of a "I dare you" way, so my uncle did just what he was saying he'd do. If I remember correctly, he paid the most in taxes, so all the money the town was getting from him disappeared. Most of his employees were in high school and couldn't drive. When he moved, the kids went with him. Since the parents had to drive their kids to their job, they decided they'd also pick up groceries and other things they needed while they were in the new town. So the clothing shop and grocery store went out of business. Since no one could get what they needed in our small town, just about everyone moved. Now the town is run down and there's barely anything there. My dad said it used to be a nice little town. Now hardly anyone lives there and everything is falling apart. My uncle even warned the council if I leave I'll take this town with me, but they didn't listen. My next-door neighbor kept picking my plum tree dry when I'd go out of town, so I just cut it down out of frustration. No plum jelly for anyone. I had a group project I had to do with 4 other people. 3 of the 4 were great, but there were roles each of us had to fill in the group for the project to work right. The final girl never once participated in the project, so her role was completely empty and it was dragging the rest of us down. We just couldn't fill in for her either because she kept her specific instructions to herself. The other 3 and I did the best we could, but our instructor didn't seem impressed. We had a few questions about how we came to our conclusions and who did what in the group. The other 3 were trying to keep focus on the roles they filled out, but the instructor was asking about the role that the other girl skipped out on. I answered that we didn't have anything from that role because What's-Her-Face didn't come to any of the project sessions. We just did what we could without her. Up until that point, the girl that didn't do anything was standing there acting like she deserved the same grade we all got. Once I said something, the other 3 girls confirmed that yes, Becky's butt did 0% of the work. She tried to say she was just really busy, but another girl shut her down by saying she saw her at several parties the past couple of weeks. That girl got a 0, and the rest of us got like an 85 or around that number. I felt like a snitch, but screw Becky. Growing up, my best friend and I got in trouble for cutting up brand new, expensive jeans to make shorts. Her mum was rightfully screaming at me, so I said, "What about your daughter? She asked me to and handed me the scissors." And I got us both grounded, so at least we could sit together in her room. Introverts, what's the craziest thing you've done to avoid human interaction? I was 5 minutes late to school, so I decided to skip school altogether that day to avoid the awkward class entry. College. I had to attend an out-of-town conference with my classmates as part of the requirements for a course. My professor had booked a block of rooms at the hotel where the conference was held, and people were going to put 3 to 4 guys or girls to a room and split the cost. My classmates had a bunch of socializing and bar hopping planned, which sounds like my idea of a living hell. Also, all of them carpooled together in groups. I honestly would rather have walked barefoot across a mile of Legos than be held hostage in a car for 4 hours with people I barely know. A few people asked if I wanted to carpool with them and what room I was in, and I said, "Oh, thank you so much. I'm actually staying with a friend in town though, and I'm stoked to see her. I'm going to have to take my own car so I can drive to the conference. I'll catch you guys there." Just so I wouldn't come off as a weirdo. But I actually reserved a room at another hotel way across town, attended the bare minimum of the conference, and enjoyed as many coffee shops, art museums, downtown shopping trips, and nature trails as I could. When I was in the military, I volunteered for a deployment to get out of going to a wedding. Back when I had roommates I didn't know very well, I'd spend all day in my room without meals to avoid awkward pleasantries. Then I'd get really hungry, but the prospect of explaining why I'd spent all day in my room kept me inside. Then they'd text me and ask me if I was okay, and I'd say, "Yep, just keeping busy with some projects." And they'd ask if I'd eaten anything since they hadn't seen me, and I'd say, "Yep, trust me, I'd never go without food." And then I'd wake up at midnight and steal my own food from the fridge. I've done the same thing, except I already knew my roommate pretty well. He just had some company over that I didn't want to talk to. So I stayed in my room for 2 days, except for like 3 or 4 in the morning, when I'd sneak out to get food from 24-hour fast food joints. The narrator is incapable of waiting for longer than like 2 hours without going feral and making a sprint for the fridge and cupboard, so your restraint is equally as impressive as your massive, massive introverted bent. In high school, I didn't have a car, so I just walked home. I used to just walk fast to try and beat the crowd of people, but I just didn't want to deal with it anymore, so I would stay in the computer lab sometimes and ask my dad to pick me up a few hours later. So once the bell rang to go home, I'd just stay in class since I had computers last. The teacher would forget I was there and not even notice me and turn the lights off, lock the door, and then leave. Honestly, I didn't mind at all. I got to play video games by myself, and one time, about an hour and a half later, the janitor came in and I guess I scared him. He turned on the lights and literally screamed when he saw me. Rather than associate with my nosy aunt when I lived with her, I told her I was going out for a while, moved my car up the street, and sat in it watching Netflix on my phone for a couple of hours. I killed my already dead grandma a couple of times to get out of social events. "Hey man, you gonna make it to the party?" "I can't. I have plans to go murder my grandma instead." I went to an empty room and stood in the dark for 45 minutes to avoid a team bonding event. In 7th grade, I'd hide in the science lab during lunch and recess time and feed and play with the school pets. I'd ask to use the bathroom around 10 minutes into lunch and then come back in the last 2 minutes, and they probably thought I had some real bad bowel issues. There were 2 birds, a bunny and 2 guinea pigs. I'd feed them carrots and talk to them. Nobody knew that I was there for half the year when one of my teachers finally walked in on me. I thought I was busted. Luckily, she was one of the nicer ones and made it my official job to play with and feed the animals. I had something similar happen in 7th grade. I don't remember how it started, but at one point a couple of 8th grade girls bullied me and I volunteered to help a teacher during her lunch period. Same as mine. I'd grade spelling tests. So she hired me as her assistant and I graded papers. I was a very good student and spelling was my jam, so it's not like I hated it. Fun fact, we're now friends on Facebook 35 years later. What a great teacher. But the fact is, I'm sure she loved me for saving her from taking home a bunch of stuff to grade. I go through the drive-thru just to park and eat alone in my car. I went on a 3-week camping trip to avoid 2 family reunions. I'm going to be driving across country starting tomorrow to avoid my family's Thanksgiving dinner, so I feel you. I stopped talking for an entire year of school, 5th grade to be precise. Getting off the bus at the wrong stop and walking because I pressed the stop button too soon and didn't want to tell the driver. When I was 12, a man in a suit who I didn't know knocked on the door. I could see him through the front room window, so I hid behind the chair. I looked up to see if he had gone and made eye contact. I stayed where I was. Wasn't the last time that happened either. I'm 29. A guy knocked on my door and I looked into the peephole and he was looking directly gazing back into it at me, so I ducked and crouched at the base of the door, and then he opened the mail slot to look in, which was right above me, and I just laid on the ground until he went away. I wear headphones all the time, even if they're off or not plugged in. I'm so much more productive at work, people at the gym let me be, and people on the street leave me alone on my walk home. My roommate threw a party at my house and I hid from everyone. There's only one front door and everyone would see me if I left and would want to talk to me. I avoided eating that whole night because I didn't want to walk by the party to get my food. My car was trapped between other cars. I ended up jumping out of a second-story window and walking 3 miles to a 7-Eleven. I'm not as shy and introverted as I used to be, but now I have moods where I don't even want to see a single person until the mood is past. When I was living in dorms in college, I'd stand in my closet or bathroom for hours just so I wouldn't have to see the people talking in my room. I ended up hearing a lot of conversations I shouldn't have heard because nobody ever knew I was there. Going to cross the street but then stopping and pretending I don't have to if there's a car approaching so I don't inconvenience them. I once spent a weekend in a hotel because I wanted to be alone and chill reading books and watching TV. The people I lived with at the time couldn't spend more than an hour on their own without some sort of social interaction. The roomie I have now is like-minded and we can go days without talking or seeing each other, and it's great! I was getting a taxi back home and I must have mumbled or garbled my destination because it was quite clear he was going to a completely different place. Like literally as soon as he turned right out of the parking lot instead of left. I literally let the guy drive for 15 minutes in the wrong direction, eventually just blurting out, "Anywhere here will do," and giving him a tenner, and then just walking aimlessly until I found public transport that I recognized and jumped on that. A 10-minute cab drive turned into a nearly 2-hour journey home. For those who are curious and who live in Manchester, I wanted to get a cab from Ashton to Openshaw, and I ended up going to Oldham, getting a tram to the city centre and getting a train from there back home. There was only a front door in the place I was living, and there was a very large crowd of neighbours outside, having some sort of social gathering or barbecue. I really needed to pick up some food for dinner, but I really didn't want to interact with them. So I jumped out of the living room window, walked the long way around the neighbourhood to get to the store. Thankfully, they kept the party out front so that when I came back, I could sneak back in through the window. Okay, so the narrator thought that he was an introvert, but a lot of you are showing me just how comparatively okay and well-adjusted I'm doing in day-to-day life. I actually go out of my way to cross the road slower and make eye contact if it looks like a car is revving or accelerating to intimidate me to cross quicker. I think it's up to us to make them obey the road rules. I have phone anxiety. I was going to drive 1.5 hours to my college to talk to them in person over the summer instead of just calling to follow up on something. I lived in a loft downtown on the 3rd floor. The amount of times I used the stairs in an effort to not be trapped in an elevator with a stranger is too many to count. One time there was a family moving in. I walked all the way around the building to the opposite side's entrance to get into the building. Then they were using the elevators, so I took the stairs. Then they were on my floor moving crap in. I didn't want it to look like I was trying this hard to avoid them, so I said, "Whoops, wrong floor," and walked up 2 extra floors and waited 10 minutes before going back down to see if they were gone. What should have taken me 5 minutes took me closer to 30 to get into my apartment. That's when I realized I might have a problem. I never answer the door unless I'm expecting someone. Just today, actually, my neighbor was knocking on my door this morning and I didn't answer. When it was time to head to work, I realized I didn't have my keys. I think my neighbor found them and was trying to return them. Okay, sure enough, I left my keys in the door last night, and my neighbor was nice enough to try to return them. But since I never answer my door, he took them to the front office. Let this be a lesson to my fellow introverts. Don't leave your keys in the door. I routinely cross streets or turn down streets that are in the wrong direction of where I'm going to avoid awkward interactions with vehicles as a pedestrian. Please don't stop and give me that "it's okay to go" wave when there's still traffic barreling down the opposite side of the street and you're the only vehicle trying to be courteous. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but it would be easier for everyone if you just kept driving. I failed an important test once because I was too scared to ask the teacher for a pencil. If I notice someone waiting for the elevator when I'm leaving work, I'll turn around and go back to my office acting like I forgot something, just so I don't have to endure 15 floors of not talking to someone I barely know. It's a daily thing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I ordered flour from Amazon to make my own bread, since Amazon didn't deliver bread. I took a Maymester course one year and had to move out of my old dorm into a new one for 1 month. I had a new suite mate, we shared a bathroom, and I didn't speak with him the entire time. I'd only use the bathroom if I was certain he was gone. In my defense, he seemed to do the exact same. I often find that if I don't make the effort, most other people don't either. I googled what time the Apple Store closed instead of asking someone whilst in the Apple Store. There was a couple of months, besides going to mandatory things like work or school, where I didn't leave my room or interact with anyone. All I did between work and sleep was eat and read. In order to avoid a mandatory Christmas social for work, the Christmas party was mandatory because I was working at a preschool, and the company wanted to up their reputation as a family-oriented organization to the rich parents who were throwing insane amounts of money at the company to babysit their kids. So they had a preschool Christmas concert followed by an after-party for the parents to get to know the faculty, as if we didn't see them every fricking day at drop-off and pick-up. The party was also meant to be a way for us co-workers to get to know each other, as if we hadn't worked together Monday to Friday, 7 till 6 p.m. every fricking week. Screw that. I legitimately took myself to the ER just to get the registration wristband for proof that I actually went to the hospital, and then I left. I wasn't sick or anything, and I didn't even see a doctor. I just needed a hospital wristband to prove that I had a reason not to go to the work mixer, so that I wouldn't get fired. I hated my co-workers. I hid under a bed while a real estate agent showed a couple around my flat. I couldn't be bothered to go out, but I can't stand small talk, so I decided to lay low. I had a cup of tea, cushions, a Nokia phone with Snake on it. I was quite happy under there. They were 25 minutes late. I guess I was under the bed for just over an hour. I feared a sneeze. I was in my early 20s, by the way. I work at a hotel, and one of the worst things about it are the really chatty guests. They'll just stand at my desk and jibber-jabber, completely failing to take the hint. Even saying, "Excuse me, I have a lot of work to do," will typically only get them to say, "Oh, don't let me interrupt," but then they'll never walk away. I've learned to call the hotel phone from my cell phone. I answer the phony call and tell the guest, "Excuse me, this is important." Then I slip into the back and watch them on the video monitors until they F off. I saw a coworker from my new job at the bus station. I couldn't bear the idea of awkward chit-chat, so I hid around the corner, figuring I'd get the next bus as I knew I had enough time. The next bus didn't turn up, and I was late for work. I went on an entire week-long vacation out of the country by myself. I went sightseeing, went on tours, ate out at a restaurant, all by myself, and didn't talk to anyone I didn't have to. It was amazing. I was invited to the birthday party of an old high school friend who was part of the popular crowd in those days. I knew it would be a big party full of super outgoing people that I didn't really want to interact with all at once. My solution? Join a music ensemble. Learn 4 different instruments with rehearsals twice a week for 4 months because the concert date was the same as the party, and that would give me a valid and honest excuse to skip. So instead of talking to people, I played close to 50 collective hours of serialist and phase music. Not a bad trade in my books. The postman was knocking on my door, so rather than answer it, I decided to army crawl past the door so that he wouldn't see me through the frosted glass. Then he pushed open the letterbox and saw me splayed across the floor. Okay, what is with all the people who decide to behave like velociraptors and terminators when they're checking if people are home? I mean, in this case, they were successful and revealed the people hiding from them, but it's kind of a breach of privacy and rude. Maybe more acceptable for this mailman who probably just wants to dump a package, but that guy in the suit earlier was way out of line. So, this thread is making me realize I'm not as shy and introverted as I thought I was. Bravo! Apparently on the internet, introvert is synonymous with crippling social anxiety that ruins your life. Telling the pizza guy through a cracked door that I didn't order pizza just to avoid talking face to face was kind of my low point. I used my then 3-year-old child as a human shield on the couch when my husband brought company over before a trip. I just hid behind her. 3.5 years later, one of those friends is now considered family to us, and I love that bro dearly. I took my breakfast into a wheelchair stall at a remote toilet in the corner of the floor that I worked so that I wouldn't have to talk to my coworkers. I was at a dorm party in college. I became overwhelmed and hid under my girlfriend's bed. They looked for me and everything. Once I was able to rejoin the party, I strolled back in and acted like I'd stepped out. I cringed thinking about that. This is hilarious. Thank God they didn't find you. Dude, one time my girlfriend and I threw a party at our own darn house. I felt the anxiety coming on at some point and went to my room, laid down in my dog's bed with my dog and just laid there. When they came looking, I pretended to be passed out drunk. I was sober and awake. Every single day I order Starbucks on the app no matter how inside the store I am. A lot of days there isn't even a line, but that doesn't stop me. I'm not proud of this, but I spent the last 10 years building an investment portfolio that I could live on and retire early. The reason I wanted so badly to retire was so that I didn't have to spend time with banalities like small talk and pointless meetings with my coworkers. So, in a nutshell, I went frugal, saved and invested my money, and stopped working, all just to avoid talking to Bob from accounting. When I'm stuck at an event or party I don't want to be at but can't immediately leave, I tend to spend a lot of time in the bathroom browsing Reddit. I'm normally introverted and hate crowds and strangers. If someone unexpected rings my doorbell, I'll Spider-Man crawl under windows and throughout my damn house to try to see who it is without alerting them to the fact that I'm home. However, when I was in high school, I'd still go to house parties or the club with my friends, even though I hated clubbing with every fiber of my being. Peer pressure is really the worst. The problem would arise when I became drunk. Suddenly, I'd be convinced that I needed to be far away from any and all human interaction, so I'd find a place to hide. I never went too far because even in my drunken state, I didn't want my friends to worry, but there are numerous stories about me disappearing while on the sauce, and for the most part, no one could ever find me unless I let them. I've hidden in playgrounds, in bushes, a forest, my friend's sister's bedroom closet, a tool shed, the backseat of my own car, around the side of a house beside a wheelbarrow, under a bed, in a laundry room, numerous bathrooms, and there were also a few times where I was really drunk that I tried to hide in a corner and convinced myself that no one could see me. The most embarrassing was probably the drunkest I've ever been. I don't even fully remember it since I blacked out. My friend used to have house parties in his parents' basement, and again, I decided I needed to get away, so I went to his upstairs kitchen and hid under their kitchen table. What I was too drunk to realize was that his 3 older brothers were in the attached living room watching a movie at the time. I left eventually for a corner in the basement, but that night dubbed me as the dead girl in the corner because my friend's brother kept apparently asking him, "Okay, but what should we do with the dead girl in the corner?" Clubs were different because I didn't want to leave and risk not being able to get back in, so my friends always knew that if I was missing, I was probably in a bathroom stall and they'd have to try to coax me out. As I've gotten older, I've pretty much stopped drinking altogether, and after a few not quite drunk enough club outings, I've told my friends that clubbing just wasn't for me anymore. I knew once I started bringing a book to a club so that I could read it in a bathroom stall that it just wasn't worth my time, money, or discomfort anymore. In short, I hide when drunk, or spend time at the club reading in a bathroom stall to avoid socializing with people. I choose to have my parcels delivered to a collection point that I have to drive to rather than risking having to speak to my neighbors. My girlfriend's roommate came back one night with a bunch of their friends that I'd never met before. I'm not particularly skilled socially, nor do I care to be, but I can get through introducing myself and making a good first impression to 1 or 2 people at once, but 10 people is too many. So my girlfriend goes to talk to all of them and wants me to meet them. So I say I'll be out soon, I have a bit of a headache. So I think for a while of how I'm going to get through this, but then I realize that it's been so long that if I go out now, it'll be super awkward. Then I hear someone coming in, so I hide in the closet. Now, I really can't get out of there, so I stay in the closet for a while. Then I come out and get into bed and pretend to be sleeping. When my girlfriend comes back in, she wakes me up and asks me where I was, so I pull a George Costanza and lie and say that I snuck out and went to the store to get some aspirin and then snuck back in and fell asleep. She wants to know why I didn't go through the front door and say hi to everyone on my way out, so I said that I didn't want to disturb their fun, so I went out the side door. I'm willing to pay an extra $300 in rent if it means I get the whole place to myself. I called in sick on the day of a big company all-hands meet and greet. I dropped a college course when I heard two people whisper my name behind me. What was the weirdest black market in your school? Mountain Dew and Pepsi had a contest where college names were printed on the inside of the bottle caps. If that school won the NCAA March Madness tournament, you could send it in for the jersey of your choice from any school. Suddenly, the black market for caps with blue-chip schools was born. I remember selling a Duke cap for $10, then turning around and buying 10 drinks from the vending machine. This one girl forged excuse notes if you brought her something one of your parents wrote. I never used her services myself, but we were and still are good friends, and I've got to say, she's really talented. I literally can't tell which one is mine after she copied something I wrote, including the signature. It's baffling. Our middle school tried to start a reward program. It turned out to be a failure of epic proportions. Wolf Bucks, named after our mascot. They were mini-sized dollars, color-coded by value. Green was $1, red was $5, blue was $10, and a gold wolf buck, only accessible to the principal and assistant principal, was $50. Now the school bought erasers, pencils, notebooks, and you could only buy them with wolf bucks. One pencil was one wolf buck. The first failure? It was very easy to copy. So kids started mass copying them. Okay, so the school got smart and said, only accepting wolf bucks with your name and your teacher's signature on it. Their second failure was keeping the same color, so kids would earn one legitimately and then the forgery started. And the third failure? Hyperinflation during pep rallies, where the principal started throwing golden wolf bucks. Eventually, the school stopped resupplying the store. Everyone had hundreds or thousands of worthless wolf bucks. Harry Potter books. I went to a religious school where books that had magic or fantasy were banned. Parents of these kids were just as religious, so kids couldn't get them from their parents. My mum didn't care, and she let me buy a few for some friends, and then more kids started requesting them. I charged double what they were worth, and kids were more than happy to pay. Most popular requests were Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Cirque du Freak series. It just goes to show that prohibiting creates an intense demand, and people willing to take risks potentially make a lot of money. I'll bet most of the teachers didn't care anyway. This happened in Los Angeles in the mid-80s. Student bus passes had to be purchased by the 5th day of the month, or you were stuck having to pay daily. The date had passed, so I found a guy in my high school willing to trade another student's pass which he'd stolen. I traded a tangerine and half a pack of cigarettes for a copy of Penthouse. Then I traded that issue with a pizza from the cafeteria for the bus pass. This wasn't a weird one, but a genius one for a tween. A girl set up a little business out of a box of stationery, writing forged letters from parents. She had had all different paper, pens, and pencils of every kind, and could write in convincingly accurate tones for the content of the notes, depending on which kid they were used for. She even used different styles of handwriting and different styles of punctuation and language, too. She'd even fudged the spelling if she thought the kid's parents weren't great at it. She grew up to be incredibly educated. I look back and see that as her first moment of evil genius. It definitely suggested she'd go on to brilliance one day, and she did. In early elementary school, we had a market for mud. Different groups of kids would claim areas around the school as their mud pit and put their brand of mud in Ziploc bags to be traded with other groups for different bags of mud. We were the clay mud group, and I had about 3 kids in the muck scooping it into bags or running it to the water fountain to get fresh water to make more mud on dry days. I'd be the one to go make the deals with the other groups. We traded a lot with the gravel mud group because clay mud and cement mud are both good for building or something like that. Who knows? It made so much more sense at the time. The principal and staff eventually stepped in to end it because all of the kids came back to class filthy every day and giant holes littered every field and playground. One of my friends sold Starburst from his locker. 10 cents for 2 pieces. If he likes you, you got 2 from the normal bag. If he didn't like you, you got 2 from the bag that only had yellows. I had a friend that used to bring a bunch of Coke cans from home and then sell them for $1 at lunch. Cheaper than the vending machine prices, so it became a bit like a little business. He eventually saved up enough for a longboard. A teacher at my high school that I refused to rat on would take money from students and buy them lottery tickets or scratch-offs in exchange for a cut of any prize, $50 and up. I think the guy legit made a few $1,000s off this just during my senior year, and it made the students love him. Salt. My school canteen doesn't have any salt with chips, or fries to you Americans, and people used to sell salt packets. The most expensive offer I could find was 50 pence for a packet or £1 for 3. Diddle paper. It's coloured paper with a mouse drawn on it, but everyone collected them, no matter how old, and there were hundreds of different artworks. People had folders with protective covers, and depending on the motive and rarity you wanted to trade, you could get 3 to 4 others in exchange. It was wild. I just googled it and there are still collectors buying and selling them on the internet. Our elementary school utilized ice cream tickets. You got one if it was your birthday or if you did something that a teacher thought was exemplary. People would pass them around asking for favors down the line. Some kid found the paper used to make the tickets and Xeroxed multiple pages of the tickets. He became our kingpin and ruled us for a couple of years. I think I was 16 when this happened, but basically a bunch of guys began printing paper that looked like contracts with the top saying soul contract. They came up to some of the younger students and got them to sign the document to sell their soul for eternity, and would pay them $2 to $3. We had a good laugh when some of the students became worried they actually sold their soul. Our school did this too. The kids who regretted it had to buy their souls back at a 50% markup. Noah still has my soul. I never bought it back. Noodle seasoning packets. My best friend, at 11 years old, found out that the dumpster behind the video store had a lot of sample tapes for adult films. Basically, it was like the best parts of 4 different adult movies clipped down and put into one VHS to try and sell those videos to the store. And then it would have, "This is a sample copy," flashing on the screen, but you still got hardcore stuff, and all of the bits for which an 11-year-old were way more than we could handle anyway. We'd sneak up there in the middle of the night and steal a bunch of the tapes and sell them for $5 to $10 a piece. We made several $100s. I built a PC and put a CD burner in it with my share of the money. It might have also paid for a bike, but I might have mowed lawns for that. I forget which year it happened in and if they were the same summer. This wasn't in school, but yeah, I was distributing hardcore adult films to a bunch of 11-year-olds. Finally, our ring got busted and my friend got his butt beat when he fell asleep with the VHSs in his TV that rewinds and plays it automatically. His mum came to wake him up and there was that on the TV. He had to unveil his stash space. To be fair, the guy kept his mouth shut, didn't rat me out and said it was just for him. He didn't tell her it was a business we were running. We kind of had a history of this. One summer when we were 6, we started freezing soda into an ice cube tray because it was yummy and made our extremely meager soda allowance last much longer while we were playing Sega. Well, some kids around the neighborhood wanted some, but we didn't really want to give them up. We decided to sell them for $0.25, but all of our soda pops got bought up. But by then we had enough money for several 2 liters. Well, the next day we made a bunch more and kids were rabid for them. We did 2 batches of every ice cube tray we had, and upped it to 50 cents a cube. Next day, we went to $1 a cube with special mixes, $1.50 for a Surge cube, enough to buy an entire 2-liter bottle at the time, and, well, by the time parents were getting home from work, our racket got shut down. Parents were angry. We made bank. Certainly over $100 on the 3-day racket, and all of this as kindergarten-aged kids. The parents wanted the money back, but we said we spent it all. We were big fricking liars. I mean, we had plans for all the money, sure, and we spent a lot of it. We had huge bags of soda and chips stuffed in a stairwell where our parents wouldn't find it. Man, we had a great summer that year. Wait, these kids were like mafia smugglers from the age of 6? Man, you guys were born for this. You're either in prison or you're running companies of your own with that sort of cutthroat attitude and enterprise. Impressive, if not commendable. One day, my high school decided to stop selling soda because they were trying to pass some sort of audit. The very next day, my friend and I showed up with cases of cold soda in our backpacks, selling them for 50 cents apiece. We were sold out by lunchtime every day for about 2 weeks until they plugged the vending machines back in. I wouldn't say ours was weird, but my friend in high school had like a prepper granddad waiting for Y2K, and he literally had crates filled with cartons of off-brand cigarettes. So my friend would steal a few cartons, bring them to me, and I'd sell them out of my locker. I'd charge $3 a pack, and he'd get $1 and I'd get the other 2, or 50 cents for loose cigarettes, and we'd just split that down the middle. I only kept like 6 packs in a pencil case, 5 whole and 1 open for the loose ones to sell, in my locker at a time. He'd have the rest in his locker at the other end of school, and I'd just go refill as needed between classes for lunch. One time, a teacher called the cops because I was acting shady. They pulled me out of class and brought in a drug dog to search my locker. I'd just sold my last Lucy and pack like 10 minutes before that. The dog didn't find anything, but the cops went through everything, and when they opened the pencil box, there were little shreds of tobacco inside. He asked what it was, and I said, "Well, it's a pencil box, I'd guess it's probably pencil shavings." And he just kind of shrugged and put it back. I went right on back to selling cigarettes the next day. Oh, I'd also trade 1 Lucy for a meal ticket, which is how our lunch system worked, and I'd sell the meal tickets for $1 each and split that with my buddy as well. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Bottle caps. I still don't get it, but back in primary school, they were collecting bottle caps for some kind of charity. Google it, it's still going on around the world. So what happened was everything was going well, the teacher got everyone excited about it, and the kids were collecting it en masse. Kids would go around raiding for it. From the trash. From their school lunches. From their homes even. A teacher got a call from a concerned parent because her kid hijacked all of the bottle caps from their kitchen. So that's stage 1 of the weirdness. It's what happened afterwards. Stage 2, kids start trading with those plastic bottle caps. We'd trade pens, homework, even Pokemon cards for bottle caps. Worthless bottle caps. There wasn't even a prize for whoever could collect the most caps, it just became a currency out of nowhere. Let's talk about stage 3 of this madness. Theft. There was no bank of bot caps at our school. There was the donation box, and there were your cubbies. Those who didn't want to lug their stash back home every day left it in their cubbies, and some kid decided to steal people's caps from the donation box. The great theft of Class 3B. But it was probably for the best because overnight the madness subsided. The teacher ended the bottle cap donation. She was sick of the bugs that were gathering and licking up the dried sugar juices from the caps anyway, but mostly horrified at how her little charity drive devolved into a socio-economical experiment. So just like that, the bottle cap market crashed. We did a weird assignment for a month where we ran a society for an hour each day in our classroom. People had little shops they ran from their desks, they were elected positions, laws you could be ticketed for breaking, etc. It was all run on fake money, of course. I got elected chief of police and handed out tickets for stuff like chewing gum in class. But a combination of laziness and not wanting everyone to hate me caused me to slack off, and I got fired after 2 weeks. So I opened a shop instead and sold stuff, including gum, which in hindsight makes me like a cop who becomes a substance dealer. The final week of this rolls around and there was an announcement. At the end, all of your money will be tallied up, any debts or taxes you owe subtracted, and any kid who wound up with a positive amount gets a pizza party. Kids who are in the red have to write an assignment on how and why they screwed up. This electrifies the class. Missing out on a pizza party is a big deal when you're 10, and well under half the class is currently in the black. Tons of them have taken out big loans in the beginning to set up businesses and had no way to repay them. Not me though, as I'd been receiving a salary as a cop, and after being fired, I just used the money I'd accumulated to set up shop and had no debts. Few in the class could say that, so I was sitting pretty. Soon I started receiving offers of real money on the playground for some of my fake money. You only needed to be $1 over 0 to win, so I could spare plenty. I made about $40 in actual cash. I think I charged $5 for 100 fake dollars and I got 8 people to accept. So I was a corrupt cop who became a substance dealer who became a money launderer. And I won. So I definitely learned a lot about how society works. I organized the black market. My school banned Pokemon cards, so I made a new game with paper cards. I was drawing pretty well, so I folded a paper in 9, made pieces approximately the size of a Pokemon card, and created a whole new game out of this. I sold boosters for 10 cents, spent all of my afternoons drawing cards for the school. Teachers eventually heard of it and couldn't ban it because it was still officially me distributing things. Then I started to do replicas of Pokemon cards. Like, people had to show me the proof after school that they owned the card. I made a replica, and then the whole Pokemon card trading continued with paper replicas. Then after school, people made the real exchanges based on what replicas they exchanged during school. I used to sell bags of sugar and Kool-Aid, like bootleg Lick'em sticks. Also sold red-hot toothpicks I made from cinnamon oil. When I got into high school, my family was one of the first to get a computer. I made a killing from printing out fake report cards. I was quite the entrepreneurial little bag of crap. Again, I wonder whether the kids who feature in these stories are just thugs capitalizing on a market, or whether this drive and entrepreneurship were the signs of early genius of some sort. There's probably a bit of each in varying levels scattered through these stories, I guess. In Year 10, I was able to gain access to a teacher's account on my school tablet, which allowed me to get internet access. I then realized I could open a hotspot, which allowed other students to have internet access on their tablets. All of this was necessary because we weren't allowed to have cell phones. I decided to charge $10 a week for each student that wanted to subscribe for internet access, which I was distributing. I started receiving requests from students not in the radius of the hotspot, and thus I figured out a way for users to SSH connect to my school tablet and use it to gain internet access. It was a mess, and the network became too slow, but I was still getting paid regardless. Best of all, the IT guy knew what I was doing, but he couldn't stop it since the school only employed one person to handle everything, and thus he was too busy to do anything about it. Drawings. It started out as a joke. Some kids make beautiful drawings and trade them for other drawings. At one point, we decided to give them a value. If a drawing was really pretty, let's say 8 out of 10, we'd number it with 8, and you could trade it for 2 4s. There were kids that wouldn't draw but were chosen to rate these drawings. At one point, kids would trade snacks for beautiful drawings. This started in my class, and in a couple of days, the whole school was doing it. My drawings were okay, but not great, and sadly, I never got snacks to bring to school, so I had nothing to trade. So I decided to recruit other kids that were really good and would be their manager, so they had more time to draw. I had siblings in other grades, so I'd contact them to trade these in their class so there was more ground to collect snacks from. I also bargained with the kids that would rate the drawings, promising them a share of the snacks. My clients would share their snacks with me as a payment for my services. I still remember those stupid horse flower drawings. Horse girls went nuts over these and would give anything for them. In high school, I was the only kid in my year who knew how to download music to your phone. I'd make a list of songs people wanted and would transfer these through Bluetooth. I'd charge 1 cookie for 1 song. There was a tree at one end of the playground that had loads of small jade rocks underneath. We had a full mining operation using stones as spades to find them. Not really black market, but kind of. It was in the 90s and most people had a computer, but internet was still very slow when you had it. I was a teen and had managed to get my hands on a CD-ROM with 3 adult videos on it. The kind of CD-ROM that was offered with the magazine you could find on the highest shelf of the newspaper stand. I was starting to know all 3 videos by heart, so I decided to lend it to a friend, and then I kind of forgot about it. A few days later, I noticed that during class, another unrelated person was lending my video to yet another guy. My CD-ROM was having a life of its own, moving from hand to hand, providing happiness along its way. I was very proud. There was a black market at my school for leaves and feathers that were deemed to be cool. People would genuinely pay 2 New Zealand bucks for a frickin' leaf. Looking back at it, it's actually kind of funny. Spicy sweet chili Doritos. This one kid would buy every single bag out of the vending machines and sell them for like double the cost. I ran a black market in my school. You remember Columbia House, where you could get 10 VHS movies for like 99 cents, but then you had to buy 5 more at a regular price? Well, I did the math and figured out what the actual price per videotape was after all commitments to the club were made, and it was like $5. So I took orders from classmates, bought movies for them, and then sold them at a slight markup. Basically, I was undercutting Suncoast. Pogs back in the 90s. Sure, you could easily trade your standard, commercial Pogs out in the open. We'd do it before and after class. Teachers and administrators didn't care. "Oh look, it's got Simba on it, cute," I remember one of them saying. But there was a darker, more interesting trading game afoot, lurking in the boys' bathroom mid-class. The kind that, if found, would easily get you detention or possibly even suspension. Doom Pogs. Doom Pogs were awful and awesome all at once. Circular cutouts from old adult magazines, gory grossness from Fangoria, creatively illustrated preteen brilliance like, and the narrator has switched out the words here, F-Master and Miss Alford's hoo-ha. This last word was written in marker over the picture of a cat. These were just some of the devilishly deviant 7th grade wares you could find during emergency bathroom trips during 3rd and 5th period. It was quite a sight. And then, just as quickly as it began, it all came crashing down. Not because of a slip-up by any one student. No, what killed the Doom Pog trade in our school was the sudden bursting in of the vice principal, who had to go number 2 real bad and just couldn't hold it till he got to the teacher's bathroom in the office. And there we were, caught red-handed. I wish I could say it was Madonna's chest glued over top of a yin-yang symbol that did us in that day, but the truth is it was our own hubris and greed. And with that, the great Doom Pog trade died. Or so they thought. Some girl was in a multi-level marketing scheme and was trying to sell us perfumes. I'd say this was tragic, but maybe school was exactly the right time to fall for crappy pyramid schemes. After graduating, not so much. Sharpened sticks. When we learned about cavemen, we decided that it would be a great idea to create our own prehistoric clan, so we smashed rocks and used them to sharpen tree branches. Some of us were particularly keen on sharpening and started to use walls as grindstones. They were able to sharpen about 6 sticks in half an hour and started exchanging them for berries during recess. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.